And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 3 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Now, Rishi Sunak's just been talking, hasn't he? A seismic moment in British political history. But is he a winner or a loser for you? That's what I want to know. Get the emails coming in. In other news, we're talking about this. Yes, Tory MPs, the verdict. The verdict is in. Was it a good conference overall? Do they back Suella? A lot of people saying her language was too toxic when she was talking about the migrant crisis. Is she actually just being realistic? This other one here for you as well that we're going to be getting stuck right into. Would you actually nick shoplifters yourself? Is that safe to do? Apparently there are calls for you to do it. Does that not seem like a dereliction of duty from the police? Possibly. Dangerous if you ask me. And a final one. Has King Charles caved in to Prince Andrew about where he can live? Is he going to remain at Royal Lodge in Windsor for the rest of his days, or let it fall into disrepair and eventually end up somewhere like Slough? Patrick Christys, GB News. Windsor's not that far from Slough, actually. Anyway, all right, get your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Rishi Sunak's speech there, was it a winner or a loser for you? gbviews@gbnews.com. But right now, it's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has confirmed the northern leg of HS2 is being scrapped. Speaking after weeks of speculation, Rishi Sunak told the Conservative Party conference in Manchester that he's ready to make tough decisions for the country. He's defended the move, saying the money will be better spent developing projects in the north and the Midlands. HS2 will still run to Euston in central London, but current management will no longer be responsible for the site.
We'll reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the North and the Midlands across the country. This means £36 billion of investment in the projects that will make a real difference across our nation.
The Prime Minister also reaffirmed his commitment to stopping small boats from crossing the Channel.
Our new law will ensure that if you come here illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed. Now, I am confident that once flights start going regularly to Rwanda, the boats will stop coming. Just look at how our returns agreement with Albania has seen the numbers coming from there fall by 90%. I am confident that our approach complies with our international obligations. But know this: I will do whatever is necessary to stop the boats.
Well, a raft of other policies were also announced in the keynote speech, which lasted nearly an hour. And on education, he says he'll bring together A-levels and T-levels to create a new advanced British standard with students studying 5 subjects. He'll also bring forward measures to restrict the availability of vapes to children, and he proposed raising the smoking age. While opposition parties in Westminster have reacted to the Prime Minister's speech, the Liberal Democrats accused the Prime Minister of rolling over for the right of his party, and Shadow Cabinet member Pat McFadden, Labour, says there's been a Tory fiasco.
The Prime Minister's problem is he's trying to present himself as a force for change. After 13 years, when so much has gone wrong, the Conservative Party are not the change that the country needs. It's change from the Conservative Party that the country needs. That can only come through a general election and a change of government.
The Countess of Chester Hospital is under investigation for corporate manslaughter. It follows Lucy Letby's murder convictions. The former nurse jailed for life after killing 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others at the hospital's neonatal unit. Cheshire Constabulary confirmed it's focusing on the indictment period between June 2015 and 2016. It says it's considering areas including senior leadership and decision-making to determine whether any criminality has taken place. An army investigation believes a 19-year-old soldier took her own life after relentless sexual harassment by one of her bosses. Royal Artillery gunner Jaisley Beck was found dead at Lark Hill Camp in Wiltshire in December 2021. A report describes an intense period of unwelcome behaviour and says it's almost certain this was a causal factor in her death. A murder investigation has been launched after a dog believed to be an XL bully killed a man in Sunderland. Police responded just before 7 o'clock last night following reports a dog had injured a 54-year-old. A 44-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. The dog was destroyed at the scene. A second has been seized. GB News has sacked Lawrence Fox and Calvin Robinson. They were both suspended last week after the actor-turned-politician made on-air comments about journalist Ava Evans. In a separate development today, the Reclaim Party leader was arrested shortly after he posted a video on social media saying his house was being searched by police. In a statement, Scotland Yard said a 55-year-old man is being questioned on suspicion to commit criminal damage to ULEZ cameras. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car and digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back over to Patrick.
The biggest problem for Rishi Sunak is that he doesn't seem to have the kind of raw appeal and popularity of Nigel Farage. Nigel was walking around the Tory party conference like a rock star. Everybody, young and old, wanted a moment with him. The press were more bothered about where Nigel was and what he was saying than they were about Rishi Sunak's comments about a new education qualification or whether or not smoking should be banned for fully grown consenting adults. The HS2 stuff is a controversy, because it's an incredibly expensive and long-winded mistake that embarrasses Britain and the Conservative Party. It would have been more use to stack the billions wasted on HS2 up in a big pile in a field and set it on fire. That way, this winter, some elderly people could have used it for warmth instead of shivering in their own homes. But beyond that, HS2 doesn't really move the dial. The vast majority of people wouldn't have benefited from it anyway, and now slightly fewer people will. So what? Who cares? The best thing that came out of this conference, though, for the Tories was that they are now the only party that really stands up for women, in my view. They can define what a woman is, which is a start. They don't want men in women's prisons. They don't want men in women's hospital wards. They need to make more of this and say, if you are a woman, vote Conservative, because every other party is happy to do away with you or make you less safe. That's basically half of the adult population on side. But, put simply, Rishi Sunak does not caress the heart of Conservative Party members or basically the right-wing population in the same way that I think Nigel Farage does. I was looking at the GBNews email inbox during Sunak's speech, and the overwhelming consensus was, decent speech, where's the action? Nigel Farage is perceived as a doer. He's a tsunami of personality, and political opponents don't really know how to deal with him, do they? They don't seem to be able to handle him, possibly because he's a bit of a disruptor. Now, I started a rumour at Conservative Party conference, where I've just got back from, when Nigel walked in, flanked by everybody in the media and loads of Tory members. I was stood next to him at the GBNews stand, and I decided to ramp up this talk of him rejoining the party, which, by the way, I don't think is going to happen, and see what came out of it. I even asked our political editor to put it to the Prime Minister directly. Well, what came out of it was one MP saying that he'd get on his hands and knees and beg him to join, loads of other MPs saying that they'd welcome him, rival media channels doing hour-long phone-ins on whether or not Nigel will be the next Tory leader, a former Home Secretary sticking to him like glue, and the Prime Minister not ruling it out. I actually don't think there is a huge gulf between what Nigel politically believes in his heart and what Rishi Sunak politically believes in his heart. I do not think that there is an Atlantic Ocean of political ideology between them. But the big difference, as far as I see it, is what they're prepared to say out loud. Nigel bets the house on the fact that he has the majority view when it comes to several key issues and would win a referendum on all of them. Immigration, illegal immigration, the ECHR, net zero, I could go on. Rishi Sunak is happy to send Suella Braverman out there to say all of that stuff. But the fact is, as I see it anyway, Rishi Sunak seems like a lovely guy, and I think on the inside he's more sound than he lets on. But currently, he's too afraid of alienating potential Liberal Democrat voters to actually do what his own voters want. Yeah, get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. For what it's worth, I genuinely don't think that Nigel Farage is going to join the Conservative Party, and I'm not saying that kind of stuff to try and launch some kind of leadership pitch for him. I think it's a really fascinating contrast, having spent the last 2 days at Conservative Party conference, having been around the kind of buzz that there was whenever Nigel was there, and just comparing that to the kind of speech that we've seen from Rishi Sunak and the overall mood, having been on the ground in Manchester for the last couple of days. But I am joined now by Ben Houchen, who's the Conservative Mayor of Tees Valley. Look, Ben, thank you very, very much. I'm going to ask you to comment initially on HS2, I suppose. It's the big announcement there. Is this a visible sign of Conservative embarrassment and a waste of money? What do you think?
I mean, HS2 is an embarrassment to governments who have backed it for a long, long time. It's doubled its cost. It's taken a lot longer to deliver. And it's still, even if you did deliver the Birmingham to Manchester line, the £36 billion it's projected to cost, which, let's be honest, it was always going to cost more because these things invariably do, was going to take another 15 to 20 years. So I think he's made a really obvious, common sense decision, which is to scrap that complete white elephant. I think you're the only person I've heard so far that is even more strident than me on that point, and then actually use that money to reallocate it across the north of England on projects that will actually make a real difference to local communities, local families. Because if you take Teesside, for instance, we really struggle with getting the money that we need for a good bus service, good rail connections, improving our roads. And this is a real thing, right? Because instead of something that benefits Manchester, which again, when you hear most media outlets means the north of England, and anybody in the north knows that Manchester is not the representative of the north of England. We're not just one homogenous blob. That actually that money will now make a real difference, because let's be frank, the HS2 was never going to benefit the northeast. Nobody in the northeast thought it was a particularly good idea, but now, in my instance, Teesside is going to get £978 million that it didn't have this morning, and I'm going to be able to use that to deliver on local priorities that will actually make a difference.
There is an interesting bit of politics going on here, isn't there? Because if the Labour Party now come out bang in favour of HS2 and they keep beating you with that stick, you didn't deliver HS2, you didn't deliver HS2, then they would presumably have to try to find the money for both HS2 and this £36 billion worth of new transport projects that we are now allegedly going to get further up the country, which I'm not sure they can really do. So from a political aspect, was that quite a shrewd move in the end? Maybe snatching something like a victory from the jaws of defeat?
Well, I think it's also more straightforward than that, in that people across the north of England, pretty much outside of Manchester, didn't see any benefit to HS2. So even separate from that, it's a pretty obvious political move. And I think Rishi's a pretty straightforward kind of guy, and we saw that from his speech.
Will you apologise for the waste of money so far, though? I mean, you know, in a cost of living crisis, or just at any point, really, there are thousands, if not millions of people in Britain who could have done with a slice of the amount of money that has just been incinerated on this project so far.
Well, this is the whole point that Rishi set out in his speech. We need to do it a different way, and he's not the Prime Minister that is going to continue with the politics of the last 30 years that allowed for that wastage. And again, I've always been a believer that local areas are better able to decide and spend money rather than the more Whitehall-centric London machine that has delivered what I think is the white elephant of HS2. But he's also been very good politically on other parts of the speech as well. I mean, one of the things that I think will have a lot of longevity and I think will cause the Labour Party a huge problem and will be a talking point into the next election. He made a very clear statement on immigration that he would do whatever is necessary to make sure that
apart from leaving the ECHR, I mean, I don't think he really spoke much about the ECHR, did he? And how is he going to do everything he possibly can to stop the boats if we're in that?
Well, I think that's the point of the statement that he made, and I think people over the coming days will read into that and realise that him saying that he will do whatever is necessary is a much bigger statement than it initially sounded. And I think there'll be many Conservatives and actually many people across the country who expect him to get it under control. He's made it a big priority of his. And if it means leaving the ECHR, my interpretation of that is if he can't reduce small boat crossings and reduce illegal immigration, and he has to leave the ECHR, I'd interpret it that he would do whatever is necessary to meet that pledge. So I think it will give not just the Conservative...
Would you be in favour of that then, Ben? Would you be in favour of that, leaving the ECHR?
I mean, as somebody who supported Brexit from day one anyway and was involved in the Leave campaign, I still think we haven't really taken hold of all of the tools in our arsenal now we've left the European Union. One of them is still an issue around immigration because we are still tied by the European Court on Convention on Human Rights. And, you know, if we can come to an amicable arrangement where we don't have to leave, that seems more collegiate, more sensible. We still want a good relationship with Europe. But as an independent nation, the Prime Minister has to commit to the electorate that he wants to be elected by, and we want to get illegal immigration down. Now, if that means ultimately the only way to do that is to leave the ECHR, then I think the Prime Minister is going to have to do that.
Are you in favour of Suella Braverman's language yesterday? There was a bit of pushback on that. There was the use of the word hurricane.
I think a lot of people, particularly within kind of the more London-centric media, latched onto it. Dare I say it, I'm back in Teesside now. The people I've spoken to come up and kind of slightly whisper to me that they pretty much agree with everything that Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak has said. So ultimately the proof will be in the pudding, but I think it's a pretty sensible approach and one that will go down well, particularly in the north of England and probably across the country.
All right, Ben, look, Tory party conference is done now. We're at Labour next week, probably the last set of conferences before a general election. What's your prediction?
Well, I still think it's all to play for. One, because this is the starting gun from Rishi Sunak about what a Rishi Sunak Conservative government is all about. There's a lot more to do, and I think he's going to set out even more in the coming weeks and months ahead. The interesting thing that I've been saying for a long time now is I really just want the Labour Party to start saying stuff, because we've seen it over the last month. Whenever they announce anything on alignment with the EU, whenever they talk about immigration, whenever they talk about things like HS2, I think they're on the wrong side of the argument when it comes to the general public. So I'm hoping they set that out next week, and I hope they keep talking, because every time Keir Starmer opens his mouth, he gets it wrong, and it gives us more of a chance.
There is something, I think, to that. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we had votes for kids. We had a kerfuffle about asylum seeker quota. We had a meeting with Emmanuel Macron. We then had a Labour MP coming out and said he thought that some kind of deal had been struck with him, which Labour now denies, obviously. So I think there is something to that, isn't there? That, you know, if Keir Starmer comes out and starts saying things and actually nails some policies to the mat, you know, the public will be able to judge how popular or otherwise those are. I think the big thing that Keir Starmer has got going for him now, as you will well know, Ben, after 13 years in government, not yourself, but the party, you know, is that he's just not a Tory, and I suppose that'll be the big question at the next election. How much does that matter to the public? But, Ben, thank you very much. Ben Houchen there is the Mayor of Tees Valley, covering quite a lot of ground there. Thank you very much, Ben. Let's go now to Manchester and speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who is on the scene for us any second now. There he is. OK, what's the reaction like? Did Sunak lift the roof off?
Well, the roof didn't quite lift off, did it, Patrick? We saw it on TV there. I thought the Suella Braverman, the Suella Braverman speech yesterday was a big one. Penny Mordaunt before that. Akshata Murty spoke before the Prime Minister. That's, of course, the PM's wife. We'll see much more of her in coming weeks. If nothing else, that was a signal to me that the election campaign is well underway. When you start seeing the PM leaders' spouses making speeches from the stage, the last time I saw that happen at a party conference from memory, I'm not sure Sam Cam spoke much for David Cameron back in 2009 with Gordon Brown and Sarah Brown. So I think we'll see more of Akshata Murty. Very impressive speech, no water cue, just notes. But on the actual substance of the PM's speech, we know about HS2. We know that he's spending billions on other projects. Applause in the hall, no one booed. There was one whoop. They're going to ban cigarettes for anyone under 14. You can't buy them legally because they'll increase the age. The age you can buy them by a year every year going forward. That will happen before the election. And plans to change A-levels, drop 3 A-levels, replace them with 5. That won't be for a decade. That's in 2 parliaments' time. Whether these plans survive the test of time, we'll wait and see.
Well, are they? Yeah. Look, also, are they vote winners though, Christopher? You know, do they move the dial? Do people? You know, are people going to go to a ballot box confronted with numerous different crises facing this country and thinking that guy there, he's going to make sure that, you know, my child sits 5 A-levels, not 3, or that 20-year-old one day is never going to be able to buy cigarettes? I mean, does that win you things?
Well, Patrick, if you're asking me, I don't think so. No, I think we knew virtually everything that was announced was briefed or leaked to other newspapers. We revealed some of it on our own channel at GBNews. Nothing was surprising. I think the idea of banning cigarettes is going to be the next battle the right will take on. Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, has already issued a statement saying she will not support the ban. That ban will be subject to a free vote after the King's speech in the middle of November. So at some point before the election, there'll be a free vote. The team around Sunak tell me they see it as totemic as the legalising gay marriage, which David Cameron did against a lot of opinion in his own party. They feel that that's the importance of it. As Liz Truss said, didn't she, in the hotel just behind the camera here in the Midland Hotel on Monday, stop banning things was a big point. I think that's the next battle the Tories will fight. It'll be a free vote in the House of Commons, but you know they feel that it's the right thing for health, the right thing for people, the right thing, frankly, to save lives.
Yeah, look, Christopher, thank you very, very much. It's Christopher Hope, GBNews' political editor. So Rishi Sunak has confirmed now that the northern leg of HS2 won't go ahead. Labour's national campaign coordinator, Pat McFadden, says that this is a Tory fiasco.
We've had 2 weeks of this, and this announcement today is the culmination of a Tory fiasco on HS2. We've always supported building the line. In the wake of this announcement and this cancellation, we're going to have to look at the numbers and see what we inherit whenever the election comes.
The PM announced 36 billion in new transport projects in the North and Midlands. Would you scrap those then to go ahead with HS2?
Most of the transport projects he announced today were things they had already announced. For example, Northern Powerhouse Rail has been in the last 3 Conservative manifestos, and after the fiasco of the cancellation of HS2, the second leg of it today, the question really is, why should we believe the Tories again on promising projects for the north of England when they haven't delivered the ones that were in the last 3 election manifestos?
Yeah, look, very quickly, a little bit of reaction in the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.com. This is from Megan, who says, brilliant conference and speech by Rishi. Males can never be female. Talking about, investment into the north, strong stuff on illegal migration. She says, pleased, apparently, the smoking age is going to be raised. Fair enough. So, yeah, definitely a mixed bag. Quite a few people as well saying the exact opposite. They didn't find it particularly inspiring. So keep those views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Do you think that Rishi Sunak is a winner or a loser based on that conference speech that you've heard today? But we will have loads more still to come a little bit later on in the show. We're going to talk about the migrant crisis and the Conservative and Labour policies on that hot topic. But right now, you can get more on Rishi Sunak's speech on our website. In fact, if you go back on GB News, do it after my show there on YouTube, you can watch it back in full, can't you, on our live stream. But go to gbnews.com. It's the fastest growing national news site in the country. It's got the best analysis, big opinion, and all the latest breaking news. But would you arrest a shoplifter? A Tory minister says that you actually should do that. I mean, I can't see any potential problems there. Can you? Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's News Channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's News Channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show, that's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's News Channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's News Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening. from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is 26 minutes past 3. You're watching or listening to me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, several ministers have stood up for women's rights at the Tory conference, but what difference will it make? We're going to be talking about all of that very shortly. Here's a question for you, then. If you saw someone shoplifting, what would you do? A Conservative minister wants you to detain them. So Policing Minister Chris Philp said the wider public, including shop staff and security guards, do have the power of citizen's arrest. Where it's safe to do so, I would encourage that to be used. Because if you do just let people walk in and take stuff and walk out without a proper challenge, including potentially a physical challenge, then it will just escalate. Look, nice idea, maybe. You know, you play these things in your head, don't you? I don't know about you, but I do it. Oh, if someone tried to nick my phone, I'd chase after them, I'd wrestle them to the ground and I'd get it back. In reality, I'd probably just stand there, open-mouthed, too scared to do anything. But I'm joined now by Simon Harding, who's a former senior investigating officer at the Met Police. Simon, thank you very much. In this era of not just knives, but rampant machete use as well, is it quite irresponsible to suggest that people should tackle shoplifters themselves?
Well, I think it's a bit of a throwaway comment to say that everyone, should, and especially when you just say, safe to do so. I mean, that's a very little comment in a big sentence, isn't it? Because that's one of the biggest things. It's safety for yourself. You've got to consider also the safety of other people and the person that you're detaining. I mean, we've seen in many occasions, in many different industries, where people are detained wrongly and, positional asphyxia is created and people die. We've seen it in the leisure industry quite recently. So there's lots to consider. And, if you're being asked to make a dynamic risk assessment in front of, trying to look and suggest whether or not you would detain somebody, that video that we've seen of those, not the one you're showing now, but the one where those people did detain the shoplifters in that Tesco's, these are ex-cops. They're people being trained in security. They're not have-a-go heroes who are on their lunch break, from a local business. They are people that have had previous experience in this. So to sort of put that as a benchmark for people to get involved, I think is a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, I would have reservations about it. I would also have reservations about whether or not you do detain someone, even if they are nicking stuff, and then you get done for something and sued for because you busted one of their knees or something like that. I mean, it just also appears to me like they normally kind of come in groups. It's like it can be a swarm of shoplifters. And so, like we just saw in that clip there. So you tackle one of them, and then their mates come, and they kick your head in, and it becomes a bigger problem, doesn't it? I mean, this is what, with respect, police are for, isn't it? This is why we have CCTV cameras, so that if somebody does nick something, you can go to the police and you can go, here's a video of it. Can you do something about it, please?
Yeah, it is, and it's not the responsibility of the public to deal with this sort of thing. It would, like you say, you'd all think if it happened to you and you were standing there, I would still think as an ex-police officer that if I was standing there and it happened. But I think if that risk assessment was that there was 15 or 20 of them running through the shop, obviously you've got to make a decision for your own personal safety. But there's a lot, security guards and people like that. You're seeing videos now of them just standing and watching people, and I think, that they come from a very poorly paid industry. They're not willing to put themselves in front of these people. And why should they if there's a personal safety to them as well?
Yeah, that's something. I think there's a big difference there between somebody who is paid to be a security guard. They're not decoration. They might as well just be one of those cardboard cutouts of police officers that you sometimes see at train stations standing in the newsagents there to decide to try to put off somebody who's clearly so thick that they wouldn't realise that that's not a real person. But, if you are paying security staff, then I would argue that they should be the ones to tackle it. And, it does annoy me when you've got security staff there who think, it's not worth it. I mean, what's the point of their job, just to stand around?
Yeah, I mean, it's right. You do. It's frustrating to watch, but I think when you're in that situation, obviously, and they are looking at being completely outnumbered, they're not going to put themselves in risk for that. But there's not enough security guard. I work a lot with the hospitality industry, and door staff and things like that to help them. And there's never enough of these people, and they're so poorly paid that I don't really think that they feel that they want to do it so much so. So.
Yeah.
It's a difficult situation for them, but you know, it always comes back down to the police, isn't it? And I think just picking out of that story of those people that tackled those guys at Tesco's and, you know, being called heroes. Well, I'm afraid that was, you know, one of them was nearly headbutted.
Yeah.
And then you had the real issue for me, and it was that the officers then, the police officers that turned up and dealt with it, and I'm embarrassed to say so, bailed them. There's absolutely, from what I can see, you know, in simple shoplifting, in terms of that, you've got the person, you've got the goods, you take the statements, and you charge them. What is the reason that they've been conditionally bailed out? And that's probably where we're falling down. These people might be off the streets if they are recidivist shoplifters, for example.
Yeah, Simon, look, thank you very much. Simon Harding there, who's a former senior investigating officer at the Met Police. Just very quickly, Jane's been on the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.com. I thought the Rishi Sunak speech was inspiring, energising and invigorating. Regarding Patrick's views this afternoon, I do feel it's easy for Nigel Farage to be critical on hand-picked subjects compared to our Prime Minister, who has the responsibility of every aspect of our country and the running of it. She goes on to say, after the speech and conference as a whole, I feel very optimistic. So, there you go. That's a view from Jane. Yeah, fair enough. I think the mood around the Conservative Party is probably brighter after the conference than it was going in. Loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. We will have a lot of talk about the Tory minister's comments on women's rights and what they had to say about trans people as well, on female hospital wards and women's prisons. Is it fair to say the Conservative Party is now the only party that stands up for women? But right now, it's your headlines with Rhiannon Joe.
Good afternoon, it's 3:32, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has confirmed the northern leg of HS2 is being scrapped. Rishi Sunak told the Conservative Party conference in Manchester that he's ready to make tough decisions for the country. Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, says the announcement's not a coherent plan. Rishi Sunak says the money's better off elsewhere.
We'll reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the North and the Midlands across the country. This means £36 billion of investment in the projects that will make a real difference across our nation.
The Countess of Chester Hospital is under investigation for corporate manslaughter. It follows Lucy Letby's murder convictions, the former nurse jailed for life after killing 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others at the hospital's neonatal unit. Cheshire Constabulary confirmed it's focusing on the indictment period between June 2015 and 2016. It says it's considering areas including senior leadership and decision-making to determine whether any criminality has taken place. A murder investigation has been launched after a dog believed to be an XL bully killed a man in Sunderland. Police responded just before 7 o'clock last night following reports a dog had injured a 54-year-old. A 44-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. The dog was destroyed at the scene. A second has been seized. And GB News has sacked Lawrence Fox and Calvin Robinson. They were both suspended last week after the actor-turned-politician made on-air comments about journalist Ava Evans. In a separate development today, the Reclaim Party leader was arrested shortly after he posted a video on social media saying his house was being searched by police. In a statement, Scotland Yard said a 45-year-old man's being questioned on suspicion to commit criminal damage to ULEZ cameras. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2130 and €1.1556. The price of gold is £1,500 and 23 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 sits 7,413 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
There was some strong stuff that came out of the Conservative Party conference, and not least, I think, where the Conservative Party and Rishi Sunak stand when it comes to, or at least say they stand when it comes to women's rights and the trans debate as well, declaring that it was just common sense when it came to defining what a woman is. Rishi Sunak made the comments during his keynote speech to the party conference. Shall we have a little listen to what he had to say?
And we shouldn't get bullied into believing that people can be any sex they want to be. They can't. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. That's just common sense.
Yeah, OK, there you go. I mean, it's clearly a message that the big guns of the Tory party want hammering home. Here's the Health Secretary speaking to the conference yesterday, saying that he's clear on what a woman is.
I know as Conservatives, we know what a woman is. And I know the vast majority of NHS staff and patients do too. That is why I ordered a reversal of unacceptable changes to the NHS website and stopped the NHS ordering staff to declare pronouns to each.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot there. Kemi Badenoch was also talking about it a lot, wasn't she? And Suella Braverman mentioned it as well. A couple of big things about not allowing men into women's prisons, being much tougher as well when it came to sex offenders and whether or not they were able to change gender and change their name, therefore go on and kind of disappear into the community and potentially pose more of a threat there. As you were just hearing there, no men on women's wards. And I think that is, you know, powerful stuff for women everywhere, isn't it, if you are of that mindset? And whether or not other parties can say the same. You know, will you, as a woman, let me know, gbviews@gbnews.com, would you, as a woman, be inclined to vote Conservative simply because they are a party that appears able to define what a woman is or enact policies or come out and say things like that? Does that move the dial particularly for you? Joining me now to discuss this is the Diversity and Inclusion Facilitator, Katie John Went. Katie, thank you very, very much. How do you feel about statements like that, that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and that's that?
Well, in terms of being common sense, I think I've been on enough times for you to know that I'm trying to be as common sense as possible about this myself. And I'm very comfortable with that kind of language. And at the same time, I just add that third thing, and a trans person is a trans person. Trans people are here. They're not going anywhere. Whether you were kind of trapped in the legal situation of existing law, that means certain things have been defined a certain way, we have to live with that, and that is here to stay. But being able to talk about the common sense of what is a woman, what is a man, biologically, yes, I can completely uphold that. But to say that the Tories are now the only party that knows what a woman is, I think that's just political point scoring.
So with respect, Katie, then, so would you expect to be able to go onto a woman's hospital ward, do you think, if you're in a hospital? What do you make of that?
I don't think there are many people in the NHS who can't necessarily expect to gain access to a single-sex ward anyway, because the NHS is severely underfunded and doesn't have sufficient single-sex wards for every particular hospital department. When you go into A&E, for example, you're treated based on trying to save your life, not necessarily based on your sex. If you go on to an obs and gynae ward, you'll be treated for female issues. If you go on to a male cancer ward, you'll be treated because of, for example, prostate cancer. But trans women can get prostate cancer and would have to be on that ward for prostate. But you've also got trans men with their muscles and their beards and their tattoos who could equally end up on an obs and gynae ward because they still might have female reproductive systems.
What about...
So it's not a solution to kind of...
I think, yeah, I get it. I think there's more of an overt threat, though, when it comes to people who were born male, right? And what about in prisons? I mean, that was something that was discussed as well, that there wouldn't be male convicts with intact male genitalia in a woman's prison.
I agree with that one, and I shifted my own dial on that one several years ago, and I've worked with prisons and their policies in the past on it. I do think that's a sensible decision. I do think other people should have arrived at that decision earlier. I do think there's as I say, there is a political point scoring game at the moment. Let's grab all those transgender points at the moment around schools, around hospitals, around prisons. But I do think that is a fair and it is a common sense response. Nobody with a history of sexual violence towards women who has an intact male body should be anywhere near a women's prison. And that actually they have had the right not to put those people over. So erring on the side of caution on that is 100% the right thing to do. But I do agree it would be kind of traumatizing to some women on a ward to discover there's a person on the same ward as you with a deep voice. But I think most of the time they do try and accommodate by using single spaces.
I'm not entirely sure it's the voice that's the issue, though, is it? I think there, to be fair. But Katie, look, thank you very much. Katie John went there, diversity and inclusion facilitator. I believe that we might be able to hear a little bit from Kemi Badenoch, who was also very strong on this.
It was this Conservative government that stopped shameful SNP and Labour politicians in Scotland pursuing a self-ID policy that let convicted rapists pretend that they were actually women so they could be housed in a women's prison with potential new victims.
Yeah, look, let me know how you feel about all of this, if you are indeed a woman, and let me know, gbviews@gbnews.com. Do you now feel more inclined to vote for the Conservative Party? The Conservative Party were also accused by one Conservative Party member, who I actually caught up with last night after he was booted out of the conference, of being transphobic. And I wonder whether or not, by virtue of saying things like, look, hey, we're going to clamp down on this gender ideology, if they've riled up arguments about being transphobic, I think from a purely political sense, I would argue as well, maybe from a moral sense as well, being on the side of biological fact will probably gain you a lot more traction in a general election than maybe pandering to a very vocal but very small minority of people. But I can bring you some breaking news now. Another man has been arrested as police investigate the fire at the famous Crooked House pub in the West Midlands. Staffordshire police arrested a 23-year-old man from Leicestershire on suspicion of conspiracy to commit arson with intent or being reckless as to whether life was endangered. He has been released on conditional bail while the investigation continues. The four men and the woman who were previously arrested all remain on conditional bail. There we go. We are still asking those people who might have information which can help us to get in touch if they haven't already. The police say you can call us on 101 or message us using live chat on our website. If you prefer to report anonymously, apparently you can call Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. That's a message from the police. Right. The good news for Prince Andrew is that he's being allowed to stay in his home, which is set in 98 acres, by the way. The bad news is that he's got to find more than £2 million to do it up. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 3:47. You're watching or listening to me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. At 4 o'clock, I will take a deep dive into Suella Braverman's conference speech and look at who's best to tackle the migrant crisis and whether or not the language that was used in that speech, such as a hurricane, is actually bad or if people are just deliberately being offended by stuff. But the good news for Prince Andrew is that he's being allowed to stay in his home, which is set in 98 acres. Lovely stuff, it's all right for some. But the bad news is that he's got to find more than £2 million, otherwise, you know, the roof might fall in and he'll have frogs spawn in his pool. But I'm joined by former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charles Ray. Good luck, Charlie. Thank you very much for joining us. OK, so is this... I mean, conflicting reports on this, OK? Some people are saying that Prince Andrew can spend the rest of his days living there in Windsor and King Charles has caved in completely. Other people are saying that he can only stay there if he can afford to, which I don't think he can. What's going on?
I think the second part, to be perfectly honest, that he can stay there for as long as he can afford to pay for the upkeep. Now, he's already had to spend something like £200,000 on the roof, and that was just an interim payment. And experts are saying that the cost of repairs for the foreseeable future is around about £2 million. Now, at the moment, Andrew, I suspect, can afford to pay that money. But can he afford to pay it long term? Because, as we all know, houses always need something happening to them. And, you know, Andrew's going to have to dig deep into his pockets. One thing I would like to say is that don't anybody run away with the idea that this is a softening by the king on Andrew, and Andrew might one day, because of he's now going to stay at Windsor Lodge, is going to be back in the royal fold. Not at all. He's still in the doghouse. It's a very large doghouse, as you quite rightly said.
It's a massive doghouse. It's a doggy mansion. I tell you what, I would happily be sent to the doghouse more often if it was something like that, I must say, Charlie. But so what's he going to do then, Prince Andrew? I mean, I suppose Charles has made a bit of a political move here, really, saying, hey, I'm not going to turf you out of there, live there as long as you can afford to. I mean, does Andrew do the old royal equivalent of a dirty protest and just live there like those old-school aristocrats with everything falling down around them?
Yeah, like he's going to be like Steptoe and Son. That's one for older viewers and readers. He's going to let it go to rack and ruin. No, there will come a point where, you know, it depends how things go, but there will come a point that if Andrew cannot afford to continue to pay for the upkeep of the house, then he will be out. And let's not forget that Windsor is owned by the Crown. You know, the monarch has use of it, So it is not a place that is owned by actual royals. They just lease it. I mean, Andrews had to pay a rate, I think it was something like £1 million, which is cheap for a 90-acre place. But, he's going to have to look after it.
Yeah, OK. And, I mean, what is the general sense like amongst the royals now with Andrew? Is he's not being welcomed back, I suppose. But, I mean, is he... No. He's not quite as much of a poisonous figure as he possibly was, a toxic figure.
Patrick, to be perfectly honest, look, the royals have made it quite clear he is not a working member of the royal family anymore. So he's going to spend his days at Royal Lodge. He'll go out for the occasional event with his wife and be up at Balmoral and at Sandringham and all these sort of things. But that's it.
Can he earn money, Charles? Sorry to interrupt. Can he earn money? I mean, can he go out and earn money? I mean, we're going to see him working at Waitrose or something.
I'd pay money for that. Actually, no, we're not going to see him earning money in the sense that he was earning money before. No, because who's going to employ him, Patrick? Who's going to employ him? I mean, there's nobody going to take him on and sort of say, "Look, we'd like you to do this." Remember, he was going to front charities. Well, how many charities have come forward since the Virginia Giuffre affair? Not one.
Well, indeed. I mean, yes, he would probably have to go deep undercover, wouldn't he? Really. Although I don't know, I can see some kind of weird attempt to resurrect himself on one of those doing some kind of fly-on-the-wall documentary. I mean, it might come to that. It would be interesting, wouldn't it? But there we go.
Last time we did a fly-on-the-wall documentary, Patrick, it all ended in tears.
That's true. Yeah, actually, on second thoughts, maybe trying to clean his acts up hasn't worked that well for him before. Charlie, thank you very much. Charles Ray there is the former royal correspondent of The Sun. I've got a bit of time to delve into the inbox. Look, at the top of the hour, I was asking you, Rishi Sunak's speech, winner or a loser for you? He tackled a few issues, didn't he? HS2... was one of them. He spoke a bit about gender. He spoke a bit about the migrant crisis. Shaney's been on. Shaney says, I listened to Rishi's speech. I found him to be a wet lettuce, all mouth, no action. It's a bit of a mixed bag, actually, I must say. I think that Rishi Sunak really hit the nail on the head with his speech today, says Nigel. Different Nigel, of course, the one that you might be seeing later on this channel. Common sense on scrapping the northern leg of HS2. Common sense on gender identity. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. I wonder if the truth there is somewhere in between, which is, look, it's all very well and good saying the right things, as we're going to go on to talk about Suella Braverman. Did a really big tub-thumping speech on immigration, on illegal immigration, on things like saying the Human Rights Act was really the Criminal Rights Act and that Labour want open borders and that it's going to be terrible if they ever get in and all of this. And you think, OK, fine, but, firstly, do Labour actually really want open borders? Secondly, what are you doing about it? She didn't mention the ECHR once. Is there a sense around the Conservatives at the back end of the conference now that there's been a lot of talk and not a huge amount of action? Where are you? GBviews at gbnews.com. And I did just ask you as well whether or not you feel as though the Conservative Party is now the only party standing up for women. Janine says, yes, I will vote Conservative, as I have got 3 granddaughters, aged 21, 15 and 9, and I worry about their safety. That is off the back of the Conservatives coming out and saying no men in women's prisons and no men on female wards. But the Prime Minister has said that he will do whatever it takes to solve the migrant crisis. One of his 5 pledges is, of course, stop the boats. I'm going to analyse what he said. I'm going to have a look at some of the language that Suella Braverman used. Do you think that people who say that they are offended by words like invasion, she used the word hurricane yesterday, do you think they're just pearl-clutching and actually they're pretending to be offended instead of dealing with the real issue, which is, of course, rapid population growth? Where are you on that? Patrick Christys, GB News. This is Britain's News Channel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a north-south split with the weather today. Wet for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, most of England and Wales dry under the influence of high pressure. Further north, weather fronts draping their way and bringing a soggy feel to much of central southern Scotland and the north of Northern Ireland. That rainy zone lingering well into the evening. Perhaps we'll see some wet weather into the far north of England. Much of northern Scotland actually turning dry and clear, and here it'll actually turn a little chilly with temperatures well down into single figures. For Much of the rest of the UK, temperatures holding up in double digits. We start Thursday then with quite a lot of cloud, certainly for North Wales, North West England. There'll be some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. For Northern Ireland, going to turn into a pretty soggy morning fairly quickly, the rain moving in here and then pushing into western Scotland as well. The winds will start to increase. So turning wet and windy across North Wales as well as North West England. Northern Ireland actually turning a bit drier through the afternoon. Southern and eastern parts of England mostly dry and bright. A bit of sunshine could poke through, and that'll see temperatures up to 19 degrees. Elsewhere, we're in the mid-teens at best. Weather fronts continue to bring further rain across northwest Scotland. That could cause some issues by the time we get to the weekend. But further south, look at this. Temperatures on the rise. High pressure moving in. A lot of fine weather as we head into the weekend for England and Wales. And temperatures this weekend could be in the mid-20s.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and Suella Braverman, she used the word hurricane to describe what's coming when it turns to the migrant crisis. A lot of people saying they're offended by this. Are you offended by that kind of language, or do you think that she's spot on? But we're also going to be having this, because Rishi Sunak has delivered his speech at the Conservative Party conference. I've got 2 Tory MPs to give their verdict. Scrapping HS2, is that the right thing? He was strong on gender ideology. He even brought his wife out at one point, didn't he? What do you make of Rishi Sunak's speech and where the Conservative Party is at the moment? It's Labour next week. We will be all over that. In other news, well, this is a weird one. OK, so apparently we are looking into whether or not we are going to send some of our own criminals abroad to foreign prisons because we're running out of space. Look, is this just like Rwanda Mark II? I mean, how on earth is this going to work? But there we go. We'll have to wait and see. Apparently some other countries do it. I remain to be convinced. And finally, yes, if you're thinking about whether or not in the future you're going to get a driverless car, well, apparently some people are saying that they could pose a risk from China hacking them, Russia hacking them, or even terrorists. What's going on there? Patrick Christys, GP News. Loads on this hour. We go back to Manchester. We've got Michael Fabricant, we've got Ben Bradley. We're going to be talking about Suella's language as well. Were you offended by the use of the word hurricane to describe mass migration? GBviews at gbnews.com. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and hello to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom is that the Prime Minister has confirmed the northern leg of HS2 is being scrapped. Speaking after weeks of speculation today, Rishi Sunak told the Conservative Party conference in Manchester that he's ready to make tough decisions for the country. He's defended the move, saying the money will be better spent developing projects in the north and in the Midlands. HS2 will still run from Euston in central London, but current management will, I quote, no longer be responsible for the site.
We'll reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the north and the Midlands across the country. This means £36 billion of investment in the projects that will make a real difference across our nation.
Well, the former Prime Minister David Cameron has criticised the announcement in the last few minutes, saying that a once-in-a-generation opportunity has now been lost. And the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, says the new investment plan doesn't create a coherent network.
When money is given to projects, you want to support those projects, but the question is, do they form a coherent transport plan? Because if you have to make the most out of investment, you've got to make sure it all knits together and it makes a coherent network. And I don't think this plan does that. They've localised what was a coherent plan. And we've now got to try and kind of make sense of the good bits and work together with other mayors and leaders across the north to turn it into something that will actually work for us.
Well, aside from talking about HS2 in his speech, the Prime Minister also reaffirmed his commitment to stop small boats crossing the English Channel.
Our new law will ensure that if you come here illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed. Now, I am confident that once flights start going regularly to Rwanda, the boats will stop coming. Just look at how our returns agreement with Albania has seen the numbers coming from there fall by 90%. I am confident that our approach complies with our international obligations. But know this, I will do whatever is necessary to stop the boats.
Well, a raft of other policies were also announced in the keynote speech, which lasted nearly an hour. On education, the Prime Minister said he'll bring together A-levels and T-levels to create a new advanced British standard with students studying 5 separate subjects. He also said he'll bring forward measures to restrict the availability of vapes to children, and he proposed raising the smoking age as well. Now, in news away from party conference, the Countess of Chester Hospital is under investigation for corporate manslaughter. It follows Lucy Letby's murder convictions, the former nurse jailed for life after killing 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others at the hospital's neonatal unit. Cheshire Constabulary confirmed it's focusing on the period between June 2015 and 2016. It says it's considering investigating areas including senior leadership to determine whether or not any criminality has taken place. Now, an army investigation believes a 19-year-old soldier took her own life after relentless sexual harassment by one of her bosses. Royal Artillery gunner Jaisley Beck was found dead at Larkhill Camp in Wiltshire in December 2021. A report describes an intense period of unwelcome behaviour and says it's almost certain this was a causal factor in her death. A murder investigation's been launched after a dog believed to be an XL bully killed a man in Sunderland. Police responded just before 7 o'clock last night after reports a dog had injured a 54-year-old man. A 44-year-old other man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. The dog was destroyed at the scene. A second dog has now been seized. GB News has sacked Lawrence Fox and Calvin Robinson. They were both suspended last week after the actor-turned-politician made on-air comments about the journalist Ava Evans. In a separate development today, the Reclaim Party leader was arrested shortly after he posted a video on social media saying his house was being searched by police. In a statement, Scotland Yard said a 45-year-old man is being questioned on suspicion of committing the criminal damage of ULEZ cameras. Turkey has withdrawn its bid to host the 2028 Euros, meaning a joint bid by the UK and the Republic of Ireland now stands unopposed. Italy and Turkey have both agreed to merge their bids for 2032. The joint bid needs to be officially approved by UEFA's Executive Committee next week. 10 stadia were selected, including Glasgow's Hampden Park, the Principality Stadium in Cardiff, Dublin's Aviva Stadium and Wembley in London. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Lots to go at today. We start with Rishi Sunak, and he confirmed the worst kept secret in British politics, that the northern leg of HS2 has been scrapped. The PM said the facts have changed. The cost of a high-speed rail scheme had more than doubled. But politically, is it a good move or a bad move? Do you really care about HS2? Was it not going to affect you? And actually, has the right decision, albeit expensively and very slowly, been made, which is to actually just connect up the north, the Midlands and the east of England? Let's cross over now to Manchester to speak to our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, thank you very much. Before I get the views of two top Tory MPs on this, what's he actually said?
What he said there, Patrick, is that they are not going to build this link between Birmingham and Manchester, HS2. They're going to spend £36 billion on New Network North, which is a series of dozens, really, of developments across England. That could be transport, that could be road or rail projects, more spending to try and connect towns, villages, cities, where I am in Manchester. But a big surprise, a big shock for many Tories has happened because it was not expected. Notably, David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, very rarely ever comments on politics. He's been quite clear today. He is not happy about this at all. Andy Street, the mayor of West Midlands, he was on resignation watch for 2 hours. He has now told GB News he is not resigning because, of course, he is the mayor in Birmingham. He wanted that link to Manchester. Big concerns. The MPs already voted it through that it should go as far as Crewe. So the government's facing the rather embarrassing situation of forcing its own MPs to axe the part of the HS2 from Birmingham to Crewe, which might be an awkward moment even for Tory MPs.
Well, I suppose it could well be, couldn't it, really? I mean, the vast majority of Tory MPs weren't going to have their actual constituencies affected by HS2, were they, though? So I wonder whether or not they actually really care that much. But, Christopher, thank you very much. Christopher Hope there, our political reporter. I'm just going to bring in now Conservative MP for Mansfield, Ben Bradley, who joins us. Ben, thank you very, very much. Look, initially, HS2, are you bothered?
Bothered, yes, in the sense that there are lots of economic priorities that it feeds that we need to deliver, but I'm not unhappy from my point of view in the sense of The East Midlands, which is where I'm from, we're not going to get the big expensive railway line anymore, but I am assured that we're still going to get trains. We're still going to get trains via upgraded routes to the stations I thought we were going to get them to, and we've now got the 8 billion quid that would have gone on that railway line to spend on roads and local railway upgrades and buses and things that will benefit my constituents. So, it's a relatively happy trade-off from my perspective.
OK, I mean, a lot of people are saying that there is absolutely no point in doing any of it, though, actually. I mean, what are we going to get out of it? A quicker trip to Birmingham just about, and then that's it, is it? I mean, we've already got trains to Birmingham, haven't we?
Well, there's a capacity element as much as there is a speed one. So in so much as they've already started to deliver those lines and expand capacity between London and Birmingham, you may as well finish it now. There's no point leaving. We just saw the images there of the road, the works. You don't want to leave it there, are you? You're going to finish the bits you've started. But there are other options. And I've always been clear, there's a huge economic benefit to HS2 trains arriving in the East Midlands, but also that, you don't need one big shiny track. I need the trains, and if that means we get multiple upgrades, the East Midlands element opens up, Newark and East Coast and Leeds that wasn't on there before, so there's some new people who'll be able to access it. And from my selfish point of view, he's candidate to be the mayor of the East Midlands. We've got 1.5 billion quid in a pot for that mayor to spend on local priorities. Great.
I imagine one of the... I don't want to put words in your mouth. One of the annoying things for you might be that you didn't just do this to begin with, right? Because this is actually quite good in itself. It's just the fact that we've got this giant white elephant that's absorbed a load of cash and dug tunnels across the south of England that's taken place for years before it. But look, I agree with you. I really do. I really honestly do think that, there are now more people across the country who will benefit from this amount of money. It's just a shame that it got there in the first place. Can I ask you a little bit about Suella Braverman's speech? Because this is another top topic for us. There's been a bit of pushback to the language that was used. Some people maybe clutching some pearls, saying the use of the word hurricane was a bit strong. She's previously used the word invasion. Does that bother you?
No, not really. I think it reflects what a lot of my constituents tell me their view is, and I imagine that's probably why she frames it in that way. We need to be tough on our borders. We need to be seen to be tough on our borders because there has to be a deterrent effect in the actions that we take that prevent people thinking that they can arrive illegally and get access to loads of stuff that my constituents can't access. And fundamentally, I think she's absolutely bang on, both to say that the international treaties around this don't work for us, don't allow us to deliver. They stop us from protecting our borders, but also that we can't wait for those treaties and those renegotiations to get on with it. Britain needs to act, and I think my constituents expect us to do that.
Yeah, indeed. A lot of people are saying, why didn't you mention the ECHR? I mean, is that not the only way that you can actually enact some of the things that you do want to do?
Well, maybe not mentioned it by name, but she has talked, and in her previous speech a week or so ago, she talked for a good half an hour about elements including international treaties. She talked about refugee settlement from post-World War II that was intended to resettle 2 million people displaced by war, and now impacts or supports some 700-odd million people to move around the globe. It's not modern, not fit for purpose. It doesn't reflect the world we live in now. And there are other examples, including the ECHR. But I think what she's laying out is that she's prepared to take those things on, take those international agreements on to deliver what we need to deliver.
OK, all right, Ben, look, thank you very much. Ben Bradley there, the Conservative MP for Mansfield, who joined me at conference, joins me again today. So, like we were saying, Rishi Sunak has confirmed that the northern leg of HS2 won't go ahead. Labour's national campaign coordinator, Pat McFadden, well, of course, he's described this as a Tory fiasco.
We've had 2 weeks of this, and this announcement today is the culmination of a Tory fiasco on HS2. We've always supported building the line. In the wake of this announcement and this cancellation, we're going to have to look at the numbers and see what we inherit whenever the election comes.
The PM announced 36 billion in new transport projects in the North and Midlands. Would you scrap those then to go ahead with HS2?
Most of the transport projects he announced today were things they had already announced. For example, Northern Powerhouse Rail has been in the last 3 Conservative manifestos, and after the fiasco of the cancellation of HS2, the second leg of it today, the question really is, why should we believe the Tories again on promising projects for the north of England when they haven't delivered the ones that were in the last 3 election manifestos?
All right, I'm going to speak now to Conservative MP Sir Michael Fabricant. Michael, thank you very, very much. So, at 20:03 p.m. on Monday, I was stood next to the GB News stand at the Conservative Party conference. Someone told me, categorically, impeccable source, he's scrapping the northern leg of HS2. Then I went on air, and then the Tories said that was not true. And then it has turned out to be true. And then Andy Street said he might go, and then he didn't go. Is it a bit of a fiasco?
Well, it all went wrong, didn't it? When 3 weeks ago a Treasury official was walking up to Downing Street holding a transparent folder, and the folder was talking about the costs of getting rid of phase 1. So it all got, phase 2 rather, so it all got out there, and it's been pretty difficult to handle the media ever since. But, you know, unlike my pal Ben just now you were interviewing, I actually am very, very enthusiastic about the fact that phase 2 is going. And I don't think that many commentators really understand exactly what is going to happen. So let me just briefly explain. Though the line will run from Euston to Birmingham, yes, everyone knows that. But in fact, HS1, phase 1, will carry on past Lichfield and then join an upgraded West Coast main line. And upgraded so that it can take high-speed trains. That means that there will be high-speed trains in Manchester, not running slowly, not running at a full 180 miles an hour, but quite capable of going at 140 or 160 miles an hour. And they'll be delivered possibly within 7 or 8 years, rather than 20 years, which is what it would have been had HS2 carried on.
OK, look, hey, I suppose it's better than nothing, and there is this £36 billion
I think it's better. I think it's a lot better solution, actually. And, you know, Pat McFadden was looking very miserable there, as he usually does. But I'd like to remind Pat McFadden that actually the original HS2 proposal was very good. It originally was going to connect with Paris and go into Manchester Piccadilly and Birmingham New Street, which would have made sense. Instead, Lord Adonis, a Labour transport minister, totally redesigned it and resigned it in such a way that it doesn't connect with any of those main stations and really is a bit of a white elephant.
OK, now, Michael, let's zoom out a little bit. HS2, I'll be honest, I've had enough of it. OK, so there were some other issues. There were some other issues that took place at the Conservative Party conference, which we're going to be addressing a bit later on. The first one for me, I've got to get you on this. The language that Suella Braverman used. She's previously used an invasion. She spoke about a hurricane of mass migration, etc. Are you bothered by that use of language, or do you think most people actually agree with it and would use it themselves?
Look, it's colourful language. Look, let me be absolutely frank. I'm, you know, very pinko on social issues. I'm a patron of the LGBTQ conservatives. And I don't think she's either homophobic or sexist or, you know, it's just exciting language. It's language that attracts attention. But I certainly don't think it's hateful language. Not at all.
No, that's obviously your view on that. And I think as well, you know, when these people potentially who do, you know, oh, gosh, I'm outraged. I'm absolutely outraged by what she said here. Some people might argue, Michael, why aren't you more outraged at the impending disintegration of society?
Well, precisely right. And, you know, it does not work if you can't get to see a GP. And it's because there are so many people moving into your area illegally. We do have to tackle this problem. Now, as Rishi Sunak has pointed out, that because we've now got this deal with Albania, we've managed to send back 10,000 people this year back to Albania. And that's great. But we have to go further. And we will go further. And hopefully we will be allowed by the Supreme Court to fly people back to Rwanda. And I share Rishi's confidence that once these young people who've all got phones, all follow what's going on, they're not the aged and decrepit coming across to this country. Once these young people realize they're going to be shipped off to Rwanda or elsewhere, just like the Albanians, they won't come.
No, I mean, look, Rishi Sunak was strong on that. Suella Braverman's been strong on it. The criticism that was levelled at them, of course, is, well, why didn't you mention the ECHR? Why are you keeping quiet about the ECHR?
Well, he sort of did.
Go on.
He sort of did, and not many journalists have picked up on this. And what it was, in his speech, if you rerun the speech, he said he'll do anything it takes anything to make sure that we can send these people back.
You're the second. You're the second Tory MP who's come on to reliably assure me that he was talking about the ECHR there without talking about it. Is that enough for people? I mean, look, with respect, Mark, we're staring down the barrel of an election at some point relatively soon, and
he's got to deliver.
Just make it blindingly obvious, right? Why doesn't he just stand up there and say it?
Because he'll upset certain people in the Conservative Party as well as upsetting people in the Labour Party. Look, at the end of the day, we have got to deliver what we say.
Yeah.
And I've said to Rishi, I said it to him a couple of days ago, we've got to stop talking about things, we've got to deliver it. And there's a lot of good stuff here in the speech. I mean, I've been saying for years, I was partly educated in the University of Southern California in America, and kids in America do 5, 6, 7 subjects before they go to university. Here we concentrate on just 2 or 3. I was really pleased to see this initiative. What are we calling it? The Advanced British Standards.
The Advanced British Standards.
Whatever.
Yeah, 5 subjects instead of 3. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the child inside me is saying that you're not going to win the youth vote with that one. But hey, maybe you will. Maybe you will if they end up being better educated. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Michael, thank you very much. Michael Fabricant.
Thank you.
Who's the Conservative MP for Lichfield. You know what? I think that Rishi Sunak's wife could be a secret weapon, and maybe she should be wheeled out a little bit more often. I think that was quite a good move. She always comes across rather well. I also think they could be making a lot more out of the fact that they've come out overtly now in favour of women, defining clearly on numerous different occasions what a woman is, saying that there's going to be no men in female hospital wards, Freudian slip there, no men in female prisons, etc. If they hammered that, that's about 50% of the population, isn't it, who could be signed up and voting on a women's rights ticket. But it'd be interesting to see what the Labour Party do at their conference next week. Maybe there will be a sea change there. Maybe they will nullify that. We'll have to wait and see. But more on the story on our website. Go to gbnews.com, the fastest growing national news site in the country. It's all the best analysis, all the big opinion and the latest breaking news. But we all know that the government wants to send migrants to Rwanda. Now it's looking into putting criminals in prisons abroad. Yeah, banged up Brits abroad. If that doesn't make an ITV2 or Channel 4 docu-series, then nothing will. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Here's Patrick Christys on GB News, 25 minutes past 4. In a few minutes, I'll look back on Suella Braverman's conference speech. She used the word hurricane of mass migration coming to this country. Is she right to use language like that? I suspect that many people will talk in those terms colloquially. What do you make of the kind of people who are offended, or at least claim to be? Are they missing the real issue? But we all know that the government wants to send migrants to Rwanda. Now, it's also looking at putting criminals, British criminals, in prisons abroad. Justice Secretary Alex Chalk revealed the plans in a speech to the Conservative Party conference. Joining me now is former prison governor Vanessa Frake. Vanessa, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Now, what is it workable, this idea, then, that we're going to do a deal with a third nation and we're going to put our prisoners in their jails? Is that right?
Well, it certainly sounds like it's workable, doesn't it? But, you know, why don't we go the whole hog and start sending them back to Australia again? You know, this is absolutely unbelievable of this government, in my opinion. You know, instead of addressing the actual problem was the fact that we're locking up around 88,000 prisoners in the UK, including Ireland, Scotland and Wales. No. Once our prisons are full, we're shipping them abroad. Well, has anybody thought of the cost in this, or the fact that prisoners are entitled to visits from families? So are we going to be paying families to go abroad to visit their loved ones? I mean, the cost is just incredible. Well, instead of that, why aren't we looking at the justice system in this country and finding out why we're locking up prisoners who have mental health issues, prisoners who get locked up for a first non-violent offence for 6 months, do 3 months, you know, instead of doing their time serving their community. It's just ridiculous.
OK, so the government is saying the average prison sentence has increased by 57% since 2010. Other sentencing changes have been made to ensure the most serious offenders spend longer behind bars. That's the government's line. They say to meet this demand, the government has embarked on the biggest prison expansion programme in over a century, including 6 new prisons to create 20,000 more spaces. What Alex Chalk also said is he wants to, quote, explore the Norwegian model, for want of a better phrase, and look at putting criminals in prisons overseas. If it's good enough for Norway, why can't we do it?
Well, I think you have to look at the fact that Norway lock up a fraction of what we lock up. We're not talking like 88,000. We're talking a couple of thousand here and there for Norway. You know, it seems to me that, you know, we can't deal with our own, so we'll ship them out to somebody else to deal with. Just seems madness. Instead of looking at the root cause of the problem, why aren't we're just shipping them out of the country? It just, to me, it just doesn't make any sense, apart from the cost that's going to be involved in it.
Yeah, and you say the root cause of the problem. I suppose, is it not easier, maybe, to go to places like the Netherlands, excuse me, which is one of these countries, apparently, that other countries are using. So let's just assume they decide to do it in the Netherlands. to go to them and go, right, apparently you have a surplus of prisons. So can we lob a load of these violent offenders over to you and we'll send them over to the lowlands over there, than it would be to deal with the issues such as fatherless homes or, you know, Albanian drug gangs. There's too many of them. Is it not easier just to go, right, we're sending you to the Netherlands?
But I don't think that. I think we should deal with our own problems. Surely, I don't understand this mantra of like passing it on to the Netherlands. Has anybody spoken to the Netherlands? You know, before we sort of start sending boatloads over to, you know, Holland. I just think it's incredible. There's so many issues regarding this that to my mind, practically and positively, the justice system in this country is broken and it needs fixing. It doesn't need just passing the buck to somebody else.
I mean, we're almost definitely not going to be allowed to do this anyway, which is why I'm kind of reporting on this with quite a big smile on my face, because I can see, this could be famous last words, but what I can see happening is we do a deal with the Netherlands, we give them the money, we tell them it's happening, and then we go to fly people over there and they're on the runway and we can't do it anymore, and lo and behold, we've just spent however many more billions it is. But Vanessa, thank you very much. Vanessa Frake there, author, former prison governor. Yeah, I mean, this could well end up just being another issue where they go, should we get out of the ECHR? Do you think maybe we should get out of the ECHR? Foreign judges there stopping us from getting rid of our own criminals, and then we won't do anything about it. GBViews at GBNews.com. Loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. Talking of the ECHR, after Sunak government spoke about a hurricane of migration and that was coming to the UK, I will ask, is this the sort of language that we want to hear from the Home Secretary? Are people just pretending to be offended about it to divert from the fact that maybe, just maybe, she's right? But now it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. Well, the top stories this hour. The Prime Minister has confirmed today that the northern leg of HS2 is being scrapped. Rishi Sunak told the Conservative Party conference in Manchester today that the £36 billion saved will be better off spent on other infrastructure projects in the north. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, says the announcement is not a coherent plan. A corporate manslaughter investigation has begun following murders carried out by Lucy Letby, the 33-year-old former nurse, killed 7 babies and attempted to kill 6 others at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Senior leadership and decision-makers will be investigated to determine whether or not any criminality has taken place. And a murder investigation's been launched after a dog believed to be an XL bully killed a 54-year-old man in Sunderland last night. A 44-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. The dog was destroyed at the scene. A second dog has been seized. Those are the headlines. More on all those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
Well, pretty much this time yesterday, I was speaking to Nigel Farage, who was absolutely scathing about Suella Braverman's conference speech, to say the least. But he wasn't the only one to criticise the Home Secretary. So the language that she used has been condemned in some quarters. I've got to be honest with you, I find this faux outrage quite maddening, actually. If you're more offended by somebody using the word hurricane than you are about, you know, a housing shortage or not being able to get a GP's appointment or maybe the loss of British culture, then I think you need to give your head a wobble. But anyway, here's what Suella said.
One of the most powerful forces reshaping our world is unprecedented mass migration. The wind of change that carried my own parents across the globe in the 20th century was a mere gust compared to the hurricane that is coming. It is Labour that turbocharged their impact by passing the misnamed Human Rights Act. I'm surprised they didn't call it the Criminal Rights Act.
Yeah, there was quite a lot more of that. Rishi Sunak has reiterated his promise to stop the boats and clamp down on illegal migration as well. The Prime Minister said that although the government has made progress, there is, of course, more to be done, like stopping the boats. Many enter Europe at the small Italian island of Lampedusa. I wanted us to have a look now at this so-called hurricane, or a little bit of it, the tailwind of it, that Suella Braverman is talking about, all right? So it's from Lampedusa that our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, has sent us this very special report.
A week after more than 11,000 migrants arrived on this tiny Italian island, we watched as the final batch of 101, mainly young men from sub-Saharan Africa, left to board a ferry to the Italian mainland. Authorities here took advantage of several days of bad weather in the Med to clear the decks ahead of the next surge of migrant arrivals. It is a seemingly never-ending cycle in the mass movement of people across this sea. Lampedusa's geographical location, closer to North Africa than Italy, puts it on the front line of Europe's growing migrant crisis. But many of the 6,000 residents here say they feel forgotten, overwhelmed by the constant arrivals, with little concrete action from Europe's politicians. The Italian Red Cross run the main migrant reception centre on Lampedusa. They've been drafting in additional support to deal with the next surge in arrivals. The chaos of the last surge still fresh in their minds, where at one point 7,000 people were crammed into this compound, many clashing with police as they tried to leave. Serena Cornelia said the volunteers here felt powerless to help.
More difficult to give the support, but we try to give food, give kit, give psychological support and health support. So we have tried to take care of all the people inside the centre.
There are real concerns here on Lampedusa that the tourist trade, the lifeblood of this island community, could begin to dry up if a solution isn't found to the crisis. You don't have to look far for evidence of its impact here. Near the entrance to the port, a migrant boat lies beached on the rocks, a gaping hole in its hull. The personal belongings of its human cargo hanging over the sides. Inside the harbour, dozens of other migrant boats that made it here in recent days lie tied up, awaiting removal. Many still full of tire inner tubes, used by the migrants as makeshift life jackets. Further along the quayside, fishermen unload the last of their catch for local restaurants. The winds that have kept the migrant boats away for several days have also forced these fishermen back to port. Giacomo Migno says the migrant boats are severely impacting their livelihood.
So when we encounter a migrant boat, we call the authorities. They tell us to wait, not to do anything. Then the Coast Guard arrives, or the police patrol. But it means we're financially ruined. It's a mess. Our work is badly affected. It's too much.
Unlike the vast majority of African migrants who want to head to mainland Europe, Talla Diouf has made a life for himself here. The Senegalese national says the huge flow of fellow migrants onto this island is simply unsustainable.
The government must find a solution as quickly as possible because the island has 6,300 inhabitants. Then, if 11,000 of my brothers come, it's a big problem. We have to find a solution quickly because nothing will be done until next summer.
For now, these migrants are headed for the mainland. But this is not just an Italian problem, it's a Europe-wide crisis. Many here will eventually head north, some to the coast of northwest France and onto another boat, this time across the English Channel. Mark White, GB News on Lampedusa.
Right, OK, so I think that's a bit of context, isn't it, in light of the kind of thing that Suella Braverman was talking about. I'm joined now by GB News' senior political commentator, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, thank you very, very much. Words like hurricane, what's wrong with that? I would argue that if you lined up all of the boats that we receive across the English Channel in the space of a couple of months and set them all off at the same time, it probably would look like an invasion.
Well, and the trouble with using words like hurricane, I'd rather it was just used for wind rather than for migration. The difficulty is that what Suella Braverman was doing yesterday was provoking fear and prejudice, and that's what's wrong with the language that she was using. I mean, there were other bits in her speech which we would take an exception to.
Could I ask you, Nigel, just quickly on that? Are you not afraid? Are you not afraid of us having a massive housing crisis, the total disintegration of our public services and our national culture?
Well, but it's not going to happen.
Isn't it?
I mean, one of the things she said was millions of migrants might be coming to our shores. That is not going to happen. Millions of migrants won't be coming to our shores.
And we had 1.2 million last year.
Well, that was legal migration.
Yeah.
And the reason that they came here, partly it was to do with Ukrainians and Hong Kongers. The others were to do with people filling jobs over here. So they were actually invited.
Do you understand what she's getting at? Which is that every single year there's going to be something. So whether it's another conflict in Sudan, whether Africa, there's another military coup somewhere in Africa, whether there's another humanitarian crisis, whether or not there's something to do with the environment somewhere, there's always going to be something, isn't there? And I think it's right to be fearful of that. I mean, is it not fair to say that people using language, saying things like everything's fine, that's just lies?
Yeah, and everything is not fine, and you're absolutely right. There'll be more migration rather than less. Climate change is going to cause more. But if there's any hurricane blowing, it's blowing in all directions across the world. It's not heading our way. So you've got 4 million migrants in Turkey who are being housed in refugee camps there. In fact, they're not migrants; they're refugees. The same thing you've got in neighbouring countries in the Middle East. So it's not actually all heading towards Britain, which was the impression that Suella Braverman was giving yesterday. And that was purely part of her campaign to take the Tory leadership.
OK, so you saw that as kind of a naked attempt to try to clean up in the post-Rishi Sunak era, if indeed that ever comes, of course. Is she not correct, though, by saying that the Human Rights Act actually is used as a screen by a lot of criminals to get what they want?
Well, no, I mean, when you say the Human Rights Act, that we're signed up to human rights conventions, both the UN and the European Convention on Human Rights. So we sign up to these things because that is part of British values. That is what we believe in. Now, there may be loopholes. There may be things that need to be tidied up. And I think Suella Braverman is right to say we should look at the Refugee Convention again, because some of it may not be fit for purpose in the present day, but it doesn't mean we abandon all human rights. And again, her speech.
I don't think that's what she's talking. You see, this is the thing. I don't think that's what she's talking about, is it? She clearly is raising issues like that. There are a huge amount of people, millions of people, possibly hundreds of millions of people, who, under the current definition of what a refugee is, could just turn up in Britain or in Europe, and they do want to come to Europe because Europe is better than vast swathes of Africa and the Middle East. So they're not going to go to somewhere that's the same or worse, are they? So they're going to come here. So that's obvious. That is a statement of absolute fact, OK? And then if they can come here and stay here without the definition changing, then that'll be that. The UN has said they're not going to change the definition, so that's not happening, is it? So, yeah, what's she lying about? What's she trying to stoke up fear about? Isn't she just looking ahead? We talk about long-term planning, don't we? She's looking long-term.
Yeah, but the whole thing is that asylum seekers are asylum seekers because they're fleeing persecution or threat to their lives.
What about everyone else?
Well, I mean, then we're confusing legal migration with illegal migration.
I'm not sorry. I'm not confusing it, and I actually really don't think, Nigel, that the vast majority of British people are confusing illegal migration with it. They know it when they see it, and that's what we're looking at.
Well, yeah, but sorry, Patrick, which is which? You were talking about the number of people who came here last year through legal routes. And they came here because, in effect, we invited them here. Then we're talking about people crossing the channel in the small boats. That is something that quite rightly needs to be stopped. But they are two different things. The whole point of our immigration policy is to take the people we need for the British economy and exclude people who are just coming here for economic reasons that we don't particularly want. But all that is actually set out now. There isn't an issue with that. The issue is with boats crossing the channel and how we stop them.
OK, look, Nigel, thank you very, very much. As ever, Nigel Nelson there, GBNews' senior political commentator, just reacting there to some of the language and whether or not there's any substance behind it, etc. Now, I don't want to scare you, do I? But apparently, terrorists could now hack into driverless cars and use them to launch attacks. Look, they're not my words, obviously. It's a bit of research that's been carried out. I'm going to find out whether or not there's any truth to it shortly. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's News Channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's News Channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30am.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show, that's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's News Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:49. You're watching or listening to me, Patrick Christys, at GB News. Now, at 5 p.m, I will have more reaction to Rishi Sunak's big Tory conference speech. I'm asking whether or not you think he's a winner or a loser. Where do you stand on that? But look, here's a stark warning for us all, OK? I just thought I'd highlight this to you. I'd bring this to your attention briefly. Terrorists could hack into driverless cars and use them to commit attacks. Now, look, when you read the word could, an introduction or a headline to a story, you should treat that with a massive pinch of salt. But this is particularly worrying now when you remember that we could have self-driving vehicles on our roads in less than 2 years' time. I'm going to go into a bit more detail in this in the next hour, but apparently what they're saying is that because of the nature of these, the technology that's involved, you know, nefarious authorities, whether it's the Chinese or the Russian government, or indeed just terrorists in general, could actually hack into your car and use it as a weapon. But this isn't just some kind of, like, quack document that's come out. No, the Local Government Association's Future Crime Horizon Scan, so you know it's good, have come out and said this. There was a particular concern about driverless vehicles. Automated cars are set to appear on Britain's streets from 2025. Deep fake images created by artificial intelligence shared on social media could even be used to circumvent facial recognition security. Essentially, this is another example, another worry about technology developing much quicker than human beings can actually be able to deal with it. And when you think about the keyless car entry as well, and how catastrophically wrong that's gone for some people, I mean, that was literally a gift-wrapped present, wasn't it, for thieves, for car thieves, essentially. They could just nick your car without having to do anything. So, yes, I do have some concerns, but watch this space. But, moving on from that, the good news for Prince Andrew is that he's being allowed to stay in his home, which is set in 98 acres. Good for him. The bad news, he's going to have to find £2 million in order to do it up, apparently. I'm joined now by royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, doesn't Prince Andrew have £2 million down the back of the couch?
Well, you see, I'm not surprised that he's staying there because, firstly, we must remember that King Charles asked his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, who's there with him, for Christmas. And as you know, she was very ill earlier in the year. And also, there is, Andrew has to stay somewhere. To be sure, there apparently, reportedly, a lot of repairs required, but equally worth remembering that he got a 75-year lease on this property, Royal Lodge, in 2003. Now, if one believes what one reads, Sarah Ferguson last year bought 5 million pads, it was reported, in Mayfair. And also there's the sale of the chalet, again reported they're talking about £19 million in Switzerland that Andrew and Sarah shared. Now, however that is being divided, that I don't know, but there's no question that it isn't just Andrew's £250,000 that he supposedly gets from King Charles that has been reduced, that this would cause a crisis. There's obviously, from what I can understand, quite a lot of money around, and I'm not surprised at all that the press speculation about him moving out is not proven correct.
OK, yeah, I don't think he's going anytime soon. And also, as well, it must be said, it wouldn't be that unusual for somebody who's an aristocrat to live in a relatively dilapidated but massive house. I mean, it's not uncommon at all. Loads of them do. There are loads of people, actually, who are members of the aristocracy who haven't got that much money. In fact, they're quite skin. They're just kind of asset-rich in that sense. But, Richard, thank you very, very much. We are bang out of time, I'm afraid. Richard Fitzwilliams there, who is a royal commentator. The only time I've got, of course, is for you, wonderful people, at home or on your radio or watching us online. I'm going to delve into the terrifying world of my inbox, GBViews and GBnews.com. A lot of interaction here about the language that Suella Braverman used and whether or not she was right to say things like hurricane or previously an invasion. Look, where I stand is pretty obvious. If you did happen to line up all of the boats that were setting off from Calais in a monthly period and set them off at the same time, would it not look a little bit like an invasion? So is it beyond the pale to call it as such. I'm sick to death of the offended brigade. No name on this one. This rationale, is consistently brought into play when they have no rational counter-argument. They go on to say that they agree about the use of language of invasion. A hurricane of people will be heading our way. Unfortunately, globally, Suella is alone on this, but politically she's now gathering support. The overwhelming majority of views in the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.com, was, of course, that they are in favour of Suella Braverman's use of language. Other people would have undoubtedly find it quite offensive, but there we go. The Prime Minister has confirmed that the northern leg of HS2 is being scrapped. He says it's a courageous decision, but Labour say it's a Tory fiasco. Who's right? Who's wrong? Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a north-south split with the weather today. Wet for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, most of England and Wales dry under the influence of high pressure. Further north, weather fronts draping their way and bringing a soggy feel to much of central southern Scotland and the north of Northern Ireland. That rainy zone lingering well into the evening. Perhaps we'll see some wet weather into the far north of England. Much of northern Scotland actually turning dry and clear, and here it'll actually turn a little chilly with temperatures well down into single figures. For much of the rest of the UK, temperatures holding up in double digits. We start Thursday then with quite a lot of cloud, certainly for North Wales, North West England. There'll be some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. For Northern Ireland, it's going to turn into a pretty soggy morning fairly quickly, the rain moving in here and then pushing into western Scotland as well. The winds will start to increase. So turning wet and windy across North Wales as well as North West England. Northern Ireland actually turning a bit drier through the afternoon. Southern and eastern parts of England mostly dry and bright. A bit of sunshine could poke through, and that'll see temperatures up to 19 degrees. Elsewhere, we're in the mid-teens at best. Weather fronts continue to bring further rain across northwest Scotland. That could cause some issues by the time we get to the weekend. But further south, look at this. Temperatures on the rise. High pressure moving in. A lot of fine weather as we head into the weekend for England and Wales. And temperatures this weekend could be in the mid-20s.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and it's been all go at the Conservative Party conference and in politics in general. Rishi Sunak, is he a winner or a loser for you? After the last couple of days, it culminated in a big speech. However, this guy was making a lot of noise. Nigel Farage, yes, that's right. Could he be the next Tory leader? Do you think he'll really join the Conservative Party? A load of Tory MPs were queuing up to say, we want you back. One even said they'd get on their hands and knees and beg him to join the Conservative Party. There's a massive issue taking place at the moment, which is whether or not the Tories are actually going to connect with their base, or are they too afraid of losing people to, say, the Liberal Democrats, etc. That is a problem, especially as we look ahead to the Labour Party conference, which we will be covering next week. But it's not just all politics. No, that's right, there's the story as well for you. Would you arrest a shoplifter if you saw that crime taking place yourself? Apparently, that's actually on the table now. I think it's rather dangerous, if you ask me. Have a go, heroes. Is that the right way to go? Patrick Christys, GB News. Yes, I am also going to be taking to task those people who claim to be offended by Suella Braverman's choice of language. Stay tuned for that. GB Views at gbnews.com. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you and good evening to you. Well, the main news today is that the Prime Minister has confirmed the northern leg of HS2 is being scrapped. Speaking after weeks of speculation, Rishi Sunak told the Conservative Party conference in Manchester that he's ready to make tough decisions for the country. He's defended the move as well, saying the money will be better spent developing projects in the North and the Midlands. HS2 will still run from Euston in central London, but current management will no longer be responsible for the site.
We will reinvest every single penny, £36 billion, in hundreds of new transport projects in the North and the Midlands across the country. This means £36 billion of investment in the projects that will make a real difference across our nation.
Well, the former Prime Minister David Cameron has criticised the announcement this afternoon, saying that a once-in-a-generation opportunity has now been lost. And the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, says the new investment plan doesn't create a coherent network.
When money is given to projects, you want to support those projects, but the question is, do they form a coherent transport plan? Because if you have to make the most out of investment, you've got to make sure it all knits together and it makes a coherent network, and I don't think this plan does that. They've localised what was a coherent plan, and we've now got to try and kind of make sense of the good bits and work together with other mayors and leaders across the North to turn it into something that will actually work for us.
Andy Burnham. Well, also in his speech today, the Prime Minister reaffirmed his commitment to stop small boats crossing the English Channel.
Our new law will ensure that if you come here illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed. Now, I am confident that once flights start going regularly to Rwanda, the boats will stop coming. Just look at how our returns agreement with Albania has seen the numbers coming from there fall by 90%. I am confident that our approach complies with our international obligations. But know this, I will do whatever is necessary to stop the boats.
And there was a raft of other policies announced in the keynote speech too. It lasted nearly an hour. On education, the Prime Minister saying he'll bring together A-levels and T-levels to create a new advanced British standard with students studying 5 separate subjects. He also said he'd bring forward measures to restrict the availability of vapes to children, and he proposed raising the smoking age. Well, away from conference, in other news today, the Countess of Chester Hospital is now under investigation for corporate manslaughter. It follows Lucy Letby's murder convictions, the former nurse jailed for life after killing 7 babies and attempting to murder 6 others at the hospital's neonatal unit. Cheshire Constabulary confirmed it's focusing on the period between June 2015 and 2016. It says it's considering investigating areas including senior leadership to determine whether any criminality had taken place. A British Army investigation believes a 19-year-old soldier took her own life after relentless sexual harassment by one of her bosses. Royal Artillery gunner Jaisley Beck was found dead at Larkhill Camp in Wiltshire in December 2021. A report describes an intense period of unwelcome behaviour towards her and says it's almost certain this was a causal factor in her death. And a murder investigation's been launched after a dog believed to be an XL bully killed a man in Sunderland last night. Police responded to calls just before 7 o'clock following reports a dog had injured a 54-year-old. A 44-year-old man has now been arrested on suspicion of murder. The dog was destroyed at the scene. A second dog has been seized. A 6th person has been arrested in connection with the Crooked House pub fire in Staffordshire. A 23-year-old man from Leicestershire was arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit arson with intent. He's been released on conditional bail while the police investigation continues. 4 men and a woman were previously arrested in connection with the fire that destroyed the iconic pub last August. This company, GBNews, has sacked Lawrence Fox and Calvin Robinson. They were both suspended last week after the actor-turned-politician made on-air comments about the journalist Ava Evans. In a separate development today, the Reclaim Party leader was arrested shortly after he posted a video on social media saying his house was being searched by police. In a statement, Scotland Yard said a 45-year-old man is being questioned on suspicion of conspiring to commit criminal damage on ULEZ cameras. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Suella Braverman has got serious guts to come out and say what she says, and I think that people clutching their pearls and claiming to be outraged by her use of language are, frankly, pathetic. A hurricane. That's what she called the incoming onslaught of human traffic that every single person with eyes in their head can see is coming to Europe and the West over the course of the next decade or so. OK, are you more worried about the word hurricane or the fact that society as we know it is probably going to completely disintegrate? She's previously used the word invasion to describe what's going on in the Channel. Now, I think that word is a lot more on the nose, isn't it? But let's be honest, if you lined up a year's worth of small boats packed with people, mostly young men, and set them off from Calais at exactly the same time, well, it would look a heck of a lot like an invasion, wouldn't it? She said that the Human Rights Act should be called the Criminal Rights Act. Well, obviously, we need human rights, but she's correct in the sense that criminals have used human rights legislation as a shield to keep themselves in Britain. In some cases, they've gone along to commit further crimes. And so, yes, it can be exploited by villains. That's true. It's happened. She said that Labour want open borders. All right, that's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? But what she's really saying is if you think it's bad now, wait till you see how bad it gets under Labour. You would never see a Labour Home Secretary come out and say the things that Suella says. And no doubt, many people will be thinking, I don't like the results that are being delivered right now, but at least she wants to do something. She was absolutely spot on about the luxury beliefs brigade. Absolutely spot on. There are so many people who just bumble about their lives, willfully ignoring the news or what's going on around them. There's also a solid group of people who've managed to do very well for themselves, often, I find, through no great personal genius of their own, and live a life totally secluded and sheltered from the problems that their faux-worthy dinner party-lovey beliefs actually cause to ordinary people. Their kids are at private school, and they can afford to keep sending them there, even with a hike in VAT. They own a property. They might even own two. They have private healthcare. They live in a predominantly white area. They can pick and choose where they go on holiday, and everything is comfortable. They actually hate places like Stoke and think everybody there is subhuman scum. They think the people of Doncaster are vermin and that the residents of Keighley are zoo animals. If they're being honest, they actually hate and are repulsed by most other people. They're not nice, they're not kind, and they don't actually care about you or this country. She made a point about institutions being completely captured by socialist or quite radical left-leaning groups, and she's almost definitely right about that. Any sector of society that is heavily unionised probably leans to the left. I mean, it was ever thus, wasn't it? And when I interview doctors about why they go on strike, we'll start talking about pay. And then before you know it, they're talking about Tory this, Tory that. We spent this much on the coronation. Boris broke lockdown rules. And it becomes political, doesn't it? It veers away from the core issue of pay and conditions and becomes about hating the government and anybody to the right of Tony Blair. So Suella says that stuff out loud. I think that's pretty good. I really do. But the enormous elephant in the room was, how is she going to do anything about any of that stuff? And can she? Will she be allowed to? I look at Suella, I listen to what she says, and I don't really see or hear a woman who I think wants to stay in the ECHR. But she's not saying that, is she? It doesn't seem like she's allowed to say it. I like her, and I think that a lot of her critics live in complete denial and pretend to be outraged by what she says because that's easier than admitting that somebody who, for what it's worth, also happens to be an ethnic minority, holds genuine conservative views and is right about a lot of stuff. But she is in government, and talking is one thing, doing is another. Well, that's what I think. I want to hear from you. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. But it was Rishi's, or was it Rishi's rallying cry, or the Prime Minister's last stand today? His party conference speech received rapturous applause. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan even shed a few tears. Maybe she just saw her latest energy bill. But his announcement that the HS2 Northern leg has been scrapped has received a mixed reception from his own party. And we've just got this reaction from the Tory Mayor of West Midlands, Andy Street.
So obviously I'm very disappointed that he announced that today. As you know, I've fought for it to be maintained, fought hard, valiantly on behalf of my region. So of course disappointed. But remember, the line is going to run from Euston to Hansacre, where it will join the West Coast Main Line. So compared to what could have happened, this is a good compromise position.
OK. There were less contentious parts of the speech. The PM declared his wish to make Britain a smoke-free generation by raising the smoking age by 1 year every year. Why? I just asked why, but there we go. He also made his position clear on how a woman is defined and hit home the message that he was planning for the long term, like banning people from smoking long term. But anyway, we've got reaction to Sunak's speech from two cabinet ministers, Claire Coutinho and first, Kemi Badenoch.
So, first of all, we can't be distracted by people who are on the sidelines disgruntled. We've got to listen to what the people in this room are saying, not the people who don't want to be in this room. And the fact is, Prime Minister has stood up there and done something that is very brave. He'd said, we have been looking at the wrong things for 30 years. Lots of different parties, different politicians have been making decisions for the short term. He's making them for the long term. What he announced today is going to deliver not just for tomorrow, but for decades to come. Those three policies are going to change people's lives for good, and that's why I'm really proud. I'm not going to get into the details of which station is going to have what. Network North is changing something. It's changing one simple project into one that delivers for people all across the north of the UK.
Well, look, I think the really important thing to remember is that actually post-COVID, the way that people are using the trains has completely changed. So if you look at the legs of HS2 that he's talked about shifting into the Network North programme, actually people haven't come back to that train line in the way that we thought. So in terms of business travel, because of things like Zoom, we know post-pandemic the way people are doing business has changed. That hasn't recovered in the way that we had thought it would before the pandemic and all of those changes that have happened across society. So now what we're going to do is spend every single penny that was going to be spent in the north in terms of HS2 and the Midlands. Every single penny is being invested in those areas, but into a programme of transport which is going to make a real difference to people, which reflects the way that they are travelling now.
OK, right. Joining me now is GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, thank you very much. So thus concludes a Conservative Party conference, the last one probably, anyway, before the next general election. HS2 kind of stole the headlines a little bit, but Rishi Sunak's overall departure, do you think, in terms of from that, is he left in better shape than he arrived, is what I'm getting at, badly?
I think so, Patrick. I think, yet again, we saw the division between grassroots party members and him. There's not a lot of love for him in the room. I think they respect him, but they're not yet, the membership I've spoken to or been amongst this week aren't yet in love with him the same way they kind of. I think Liz Truss has a kind of visceral attraction to some of them because they vote, not least because they voted for her to be Prime Minister and leader before she was kicked out by MPs. And we saw, of course, the support for our colleague Nigel Farage when he visited the conference last 2 days as a journalist with us. So they want to see more of the kind of what does Sunak believe in, I think. And now we haven't really seen that. It's more of the operational stuff, big long-term planning, getting rid of these 3 A-levels that we took, replacing them with 5 different exams. In 10 years' time. Long term, then again, the HS2, 10 billion, spending all this money on these new developments around the northwest and the north of England and outside of London. That's the idea behind it. But I'm not sure they're leaving here more in love with him than before, Patrick, if you ask me the question.
Yeah, no, look, thank you for that, Christopher, and thank you very much, by the way, and congratulations genuinely on everything that you've done over the course of that conference. I think yesterday a personal highlight was you physically hunting down a protester and then being turned out of the conference during that time. So going above and beyond.
For our viewers, Patrick.
Going above and beyond for GB News viewers. Christopher Hope there, GB News political editor. What do you make of this business of long-term solutions and all of that? Haven't we got quite a lot of short-term, very immediate crises going on at the moment? I'm not against a bit of long-term planning, but the cynic in me might say that this is a way of ignoring some of the problems that we've got at the moment and then not dealing with them and maybe not being around in 10 years' time to say, see, we haven't achieved anything that I said we would achieve. But that's right, that's just the cynic in me. Now, I'm joined by former Labour MP Simon Danchuk. Simon, thank you very much. But look, there were quite a few elements to this conference. First and foremost, Suella Braverman talking a massive game on immigration, calling it a hurricane, and people just pretending to be offended by that. At least she wants to do something. She says Labour want open borders.
Yeah, I think she's playing a really smart game, actually. I think between her and Sunak, I think they've played this really well. And it was interesting to hear Christopher Hope talk about the feeling within the room, the feeling at conference, the grassroots not being that supportive of Sunak. But I've been attending political conferences for over 30 years, and what happens in the room is much less relevant than the optics outside the room. So the general public are observing this in much smaller doses than what Christopher is. And the reality is they will see Braverman talking tough on immigration and welcoming it. They'll see Sunak today making tough, strong decisions, challenging Labour to do something different, to contradict what he's proposing. And that's where he's doing some smart politics. The government have started, I have to say, doing some smart politics. So just to finish off there, Sunak is challenging Labour to contradict what he's proposing on HS2, on net zero, on immigration, and he will take these things to a vote in Parliament, and Labour, Starmer, will either back him or fight against it.
Look, I think you make a good point there, actually, a series of very good points, genuinely, which is that the Conservatives now, I wonder if they've outmanoeuvred Labour. So, as we understand it, there's going to be votes or a series of votes on net zero-related stuff in the House of Commons, which could potentially force Labour into a position where they're having to vote for stuff that might make the poorest in society poorer quicker. OK, so that's a problem, obviously. Yeah, the immigration side of thing. What is Labour's plan? They're saying, well, closer cooperation with Europe, basically, based around the fact that we are a less Brexity party. OK, but there's not much substance there. Can you now see, maybe, for the first time, the idea of the Tories winning the next election?
Well, I've always said that it will be a very close call, that it is possible for the Conservatives to win by a very small majority. I've always said that and always thought it. And this, I think, takes it a step further. Let's be clear about this. Sunak's back is against the wall, and he has had no choice but to come out fighting. He silenced those contenders that were at Parliament, many of them who I admire, Priti Patel, Braverman, etc. So he silenced them with that speech today. But most importantly, his strategy is to challenge Labour on where they are at. And and he's already closed the gap in the opinion polls. Over net zero, he's closed it to 10 points. You know, so it's getting closer.
And this HS2 business as well. Now, you know, it's a waste of money and it's embarrassing and it was a terrible project. OK, there's no getting around that. But I think people, the vast majority of people, will get over that quite quickly when they see £36 billion for the rest of the north and the east, which is, I think, what a lot of people kind of wanted in the first place. So I don't see that being a massive problem at the ballot box.
I've always been a supporter of HS2, thought it should be built, but the point that it's running, the costs are just running out of control. And the people who are saying Sunak is making a mistake, whether it's Gordon Brown, Johnson, Osborne, Cameron, these are the people who've let the costs run out of control. The highest paid public sector employee in the country is the chief executive of HS2. So I think he has something to gain from this, absolutely. I have close relatives I get the train up north nearly every week, so I know what it's like. But I have relatives who have never been to London. So there are people in the northwest, in Burnley and Lancashire, who don't use these services.
I do feel very sorry for the people who had businesses or houses that they knew were going to come under some kind of compulsory purchase order and have made a massive life decision and probably lost money on that. I feel like, given the cost, maybe some compensation will come their way. I don't know. Starmer, has he got a bit of a problem now? Because he was seen as the heir apparent. It was going to happen for him. He was the Prime Minister in waiting. It was a risky position to be. Every time he's opened his mouth in the last 2 weeks, I think something unpopular has come out.
Yeah, and you alluded to this earlier. His solutions are a bit too sophisticated in terms of immigration. It involves going back to the EU. Nobody in this country, hardly, wants us moving closer back to the EU. So his solutions are too nuanced. They need to be quite basic, and that's not what they are. So he is being challenged to be more forthright, and I'm not sure he can do that.
If you were going to get back into politics, would you join the Tories?
Oh, well, that's a question I've been asked previously. The Rochdale Conservatives have asked me to stand in the forthcoming general election, and I've not yet reached a conclusion on that.
Oh, right.
But it's nice to have options, isn't it? So
you're certainly keeping them open by the sounds of things,
absolutely.
so I must say, but there we go. So, former Labour MP Simon Jansen, take care.
Thank you.
All right, OK. Loads still to come, Would you arrest a shoplifter? I'd quite like to try to chat with him about that as well. Would you arrest a shoplifter anyway? A Tory minister says that you should. I'm not sure about this. Don't go out and start nicking shoplifters on my watch. Patrick Christys, GBNews, Britain's News Channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Dubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
26 minutes past 5, you're watching or listening to me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, after Nigel Farage went to the Conservative conference for the first time since the 80s, in a few minutes, I will ask, would it be good or bad for the Tories if you rejoined the party? Bit of context, I basically made, essentially made that story up at Tory party conference by just continually asking Tory MPs whether or not they thought that Nigel should rejoin the party. Because he was there and he was cozying up to Priti Patel, or she was cozying up to him, I think they thought they might have been on the cards. And even one of them said he'd get down on his hands and knees and beg him. And therefore, we now have a big story. But here's a question for you. If you saw someone shoplifting, what would you do? A Conservative minister wants you to detain them. Policing Minister Chris Philp said the wider public, including shop staff and security guards, do have the power of citizen's arrest. Where it's safe to do so, I would encourage that to be used, because if you do just let people walk in and take stuff and walk out without a proper challenge, including potentially a physical challenge, then it will just escalate. OK, interesting. I'm joined now by Mike Neville, who's a former detective with the Met Police. Mike, I can't help but wonder whether or not loads of people are going to get stabbed.
Yes, it's very odd, isn't it? And there's several points here. I think Chris Philp's making some good points about using CCTV smarter and identifying criminals. That's a good point. The problem with the issue he's got here are several. You've noted already that shoplifters carry knives. The chief executive of Iceland has said his staff have been threatened with needles and things like that. Yeah. So there's the injury thing. But there's a very legal issue here as well, Patrick, that Theresa May downgraded shoplifting under £200 to a summary-only offence. And that means you cannot make a citizen's arrest. It's unlawful. If the person steals less than £200, you're simply not allowed to make a citizen's arrest.
This is the thing, Mike. So I've got to be honest with you, I thought just purely about if you detain someone and then they say, oh, you know, I've slipped a disc in my back or my knee's gone, and then all of a sudden you find yourself on the hook for like 200 grand in compo. That would be my thought. But what you're saying there is more important, actually, which is what? You're not allowed to make a citizen's arrest of someone if the value of what they're stealing is under £200. Is that right? I mishear that.
That's absolutely right. So what the law says is you can make a citizen's arrest for an indictable offence. That's an offence that you can go to Crown Court for, and you can't go to Crown Court for shop thieving under 200. It's as simple as that. And also, Patrick, you've got the shop workers aren't being supported. There was a manager of Halfords who was badly injured while he was trying to detain 2 shoplifters who were never identified. But the Halfords simply said, like many shops, it's our policy that you don't intervene, because what they don't want is their shop workers being harmed very badly, and then they can sue the shop and take loads of money as well.
What's the point of having CCTV in a police service if we're going to be asked to tackle shoplifters ourselves?
Yeah, the thing is with CCTV, Patrick, it's really, this is my area of expertise. It's just horrendously badly used. Just to give you an idea, for every 10,000 cases of people being caught on CCTV, about 14 people will actually end up at court out of 10,000. Wow. There's no national systems. The police minister is actually speaking about having a national system. There's no national database like fingerprints and DNA, and that would really help to solve lots of crime, not just shoplifting, but burglaries, robberies, rapes and murders. So there is some improvements, but this shoplifting idea of people making arrests is very troublesome.
Yeah, and they often come and go. We were looking at a video there from, is that Curry's PC World or whatever it is, and there's loads of them. They mob up, they come in. It's one thing, you know, like a slow-moving individual who decides to nick like a chest of drawers or something. Yeah, you could probably go after them and maybe have a word with them. But you've got gangs of feral kids.
It's really dreadful because, as you say, you've got gangs like this, so they're fit young men. You know, you start fighting with them and several of them attack, you're going to get a bad beating. If you start tackling a drug addict, like say they've got knives, and particularly these dirty needles, there's story after story of people being, you know, having the worry of having hepatitis or AIDS because they've been stabbed with some needle. So it really is bad. And the way to deal with this is not citizens' arrests. It's to identify people from CCTV for multiple crimes and then put them in jail. That's
you know what I've just thought, Mark, actually? Chris Phil, we should send him to, like, the local Tesco's or something and make him be a security guard and just see someone's... Chris, he's just nicked a laptop there. Do you want to go after him and see what happens? But there we go. Look, Mike, we're going to have to go, but I'm sorry, I'm bang out of time, but you take care. Mike Neville there, who's a former detective with the Met Police. Right, OK, loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. Nigel Farage got a great reception at the Tory party conference. Pretty obvious that he did that. But would it be good or bad for the party if he rejoined them? But first, and what does that say about the party, actually? But first, it's your latest headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The Prime Minister has confirmed the northern leg of HS2 is being scrapped. Rishi Sunak told the Conservative Party conference in Manchester today that the £36 billion saved will be better spent on other infrastructure projects in the north. Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, though, says the announcement is not a coherent plan. Also today, a corporate manslaughter investigation has begun following murders carried out by Lucy Letby, the 33-year-old former nurse, killed 7 babies and attempted to kill 6 others at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Senior leadership and decision-making will be investigated to determine whether any criminality has taken place. And a 6th person has been arrested in connection with the Crooked House pub fire in Staffordshire. A 23-year-old man from Leicestershire has been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit arson with intent. He's been released on conditional bail while the investigation continues. More on all those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Let's take a look then at the markets for today. And the pound buying you $1.2154 and €1.1556. The price of gold is £1,499.92 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 is closed at 7,412 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News, Investments That Matter.
So I started a rumour during the Tory party conference. I said that GB News presenter Nigel Farage may well rejoin the Conservative Party. After he attended the conference in Manchester, he was mobbed by a load of people, wasn't he? The media wanted to know. They were all over him. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, even agreed to ask Rishi Sunak whether he'd welcome Nigel back to the party, and here's what he said.
The Tory party is a very broad church, right? I welcome lots of people who want to subscribe to our ideals, to our values.
Yeah, I know. So there we go. And one of our competitors decided to do an hour-long phone-in off the back of that as to whether or not Nigel Farage should rejoin the Conservative Party. So that's what Rishi Sunak said. But after listening to Suella Braverman's speech yesterday, Nigel did not hold back.
This lot appear to be unchangeable. Maybe after they lose the next election and we get the real fight between the One Nation Remainers and the Leavers who want to become pro-business and low tax, maybe then we'll get some idea whether this mob are worth supporting. Right now, I wouldn't join them. I wouldn't even vote for them.
Right, so that's that then. But would Nigel Farage rejoining the Conservative Party actually be a good thing? I think I'm a little bit more intrigued as to what this says about the Conservative Party. We're going to be debating this very, very shortly, but it is a fascinating kind of side of this Conservative Party. So Nigel turns up, and the way into the Manchester Conference Centre, all of the press only want to know him. Rishi Sunak himself, seriously, could have walked past at the same time and they wouldn't have gone to Rishi. They'd thought, we'll get him later. We've got to get Nigel's entrance in. And then you see a load of people coming up to him, not saying things like, oh, Nigel, you're dividing the Tory party. Oh, Nigel, all of that stuff. No, not at all. Talking to him about whether or not he's going to rejoin. And then you have a load of Tory MPs who've actually subsequently come out and said they would accept him in the party. Do you think it would be a good thing for the Tories? What would that say about it? Does he appeal to a base of people that the current Tory party does not appeal to? To debate this, I am joined by political commentators Alex Armstrong and Matthew Stadlin. Alex, I will start with you any second now. I'm going to be asking, of course, whether or not it will be a good thing. Oh, Matthew, I'll go to you first. Why not? Hey, there we go. So, Matthew, do you think it will be a good thing for the Tories to have Nigel in the party?
No, I don't think it would be a good thing. I think it would make the likes of Margaret Thatcher turn in her grave. Nigel Farage is not a true Conservative, Patrick. He's considerably to the right of what I would describe as sensible conservatism, a sort of conservatism that I disagree with strongly myself, but that can reasonably be described as sensible. This is desperate stuff, I think, from the Tories. This is the first party conference I can remember where the ruling party, the governing party, has been busy setting out its stall for opposition. They're clearly still terrified of Nigel. Nigel's a very effective politician. We know that from the Brexit referendum. He himself has tried to become an MP 7, 8 times and failed every single time, but none of us can deny that he's had a huge impact on the national stage. And this suggests to me that the Tories are running scared. We've just had a poll out in the last day or so which suggests that they're 19 points behind Labour. Nigel Farage says himself the Tories are going to lose the next election. I think that's the most significant element of this story.
OK, look, Alex, I mean, with respect, whilst Matthew has said a lot of stuff there about why he doesn't think it would be a good thing for the Tories to welcome Nigel Farage back into the fray, you could quite easily take what he said there and said that is why they need to get Nigel Farage back in. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Patrick. I mean, just look at the reception he's had at the conference. He speaks to the real community roots of the Conservative Party. What Matthew's referring to is a group of Tories who are basically corporatists at this point in time, who have infiltrated the party over the last 10 years, who actually don't have any values at all. I don't know what half of the MPs in Parliament in the Conservative Party even stand for. Nigel Farage has clear values that speak to true Conservatives. Matthew, I'd love for you to tell me what you think the values of the Conservative Party are. I mean, and you also mentioned that, he's lost his attempt to become an MP multiple times, but he was at that point leader of UKIP. And, of course, other parties that he's been headed up after that too. And so it's quite a different battle if he was to become a Conservative MP. And there's plenty of seats, I know, Conservative seats, that would love to have Nigel on board, a man that actually has conservative values for a change.
Yeah, Matthew, just respond to that.
Now, Patrick, you know me well enough, and I think most people watching will know me well enough to say that I'm probably not the best spokesman for any sort of conservative values. But as far as Nigel Farage's values are concerned, I'd like to know what they are. This is a man, don't forget, who ahead of that Brexit referendum stood in front of a turning point poster, which I thought was deeply xenophobic, to say the least. This is a man who continues to.
I see. I do get that. I do understand that, and I can understand the optics of it. I mean, I would politely say that maybe what he could have done was just go and stand on the shoreline of Lampedusa instead, and someone take a picture of what's there, and it would look very similar.
Bringing it back to the present day, this is a man who has obsessed about migrants and refugees coming across the channel. He has desperately tried to drag the debate to the right. And what he has successfully done, and I've already said, there's no doubt that Nigel is a very successful political figure. What he's successfully done is helped drag the Conservative Party to the right, to the point where Rishi Sunak doesn't say, actually, no, Nigel Farage would not be welcome in the Conservative Party. Don't forget, Farage has been a bitter enemy of the Conservatives in elections gone by. He's taken at times millions of votes off them. So this is desperate stuff at a time where the Conservative Party is trying to find some sort of soul and actually lurching further and further into soullessness.
Go on, Alex.
Matthew, I mean, I disagree. I mean, you're saying that the party's moving to the right. I mean, I think the political ground itself is moving, you know, so the Conservative Party is mostly a centre-right party. I think Nigel's views have changed over time. He seems to be a much more well-rounded man. He's got some very, very sensible ideas. And he's talking about things that the public want to hear. They don't want to have cigarettes and vaping banned. They don't want. Why the Conservative Party banning things? It's a party meant to be a party of freedom of speech. The online privacy bill that just went through, the safety bill. Sorry. I mean, what a joke. These aren't conservative policies. So what Nigel is doing is he's become a conduit for Conservatives that actually want to return to the roots.
I suppose, I wonder if, Matthew, there is some truth to that, right? So you know, a bit of pushback on net zero, a bit of things about banning things. The debanking scandal, I think he stood up on. He's very strong on you know, the gender ideology debate as well. We've got, you know, immigration. I dare say that if there was actually a referendum on any of those issues, his side would probably win, whether or not you think that would be the right decision. Like, obviously, you were against Brexit. You know, there was a referendum on that, Brexit won. I understand that you think that wasn't the right thing. But yeah, if he put each of those things to a referendum, I think he probably would win.
I think the fact that Nigel Farage loves a fag, I think he still does, Patrick. You know him better than I do now. By the way, Nigel and I used to get on perfectly well. He used to come and have a chat to me when we were both presenters on another station, because he, like me, likes to know what the other side are thinking. That's why I appear on a channel where I broadly disagree with lots of the things I said, because I'm not a believer in no platforming people, within reason, of course, as the channel has found out. But the fact that Nigel Farage likes a fag, I mean, he's not going to be happy, is he? I don't think you could ask him yourself, but he's not going to be happy with this idea of making smoking illegal gradually.
No, I know. No, all right, fine. I think things like net zero is more pressing than the cigarette issue, isn't it? That's got more wine. That's got wine.
The net zero thing, I think, is so important because, yes, as I keep saying when I come on GB News, it has to be done in an equitable way. We cannot hammer poor people. That's not fair. Yeah. If poor people like the rest of us are going to pay their way towards net zero, they have to be subsidised. But the idea that this Tory party is being responsible and thinking about the long term, when what it's doing is axing HS2 and it's watering down green policies when we face an indisputable climate crisis, I think is crazy stuff.
All right, okay, let's laser-like focus in on the matter at hand here then. So Alex, if Nigel Farage joined the Conservative Party or led it, you think, do you think he'd get more votes?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think the Tories are going to notice that when they lose the election considerably to the Labour Party in a few months' time. Look, at the end of the day, Nigel Farage is talking to people on the street every day and through this channel. I think, you know, we'll find as well, GB News has been an amazing conduit for Nigel's views too. And they're common sense policies. He wants to put out things and he wants to talk about things that really affect people, whether you are rich or poor. And I think those are vote winners. There's not many people I speak to who are slightly centre ground or centre right that don't think Nigel Farage speaks for them. And I think that is what political parties are missing in this day and age. They don't speak to real voters anymore. They come up with lofty policies like Rishi Sunak is doing right now that really don't have any meaning behind them.
All right, Matthew, look, final word to you, quite briefly. Look, if you're being honest, do you think that actually if Nigel Farage was leader, they probably would get more votes?
No, as I said, this is a man who himself ran to be an MP 7 or 8 times and failed. If you were to parachute Nigel Farage into the Tory party, I think it would actually scare off a lot of Middle England who the Tories absolutely have to cling on to if they've got any hope of winning the next election.
OK. Both of you, thank you. Great stuff, that. It's Alex Armstrong there, political commentator, and another political commentator, Matthew Stadlen, as well. It is almost irrelevant to have that conversation. I say that with my eyes wide open, given the fact I've just hosted a debate on it. But the reason I ask is it's fascinating. You know, a chasm has opened up with the Conservative Party now. Nigel Farage is very present, and me asking a couple of MPs, and all of a sudden, boom, there we go. Oh, could he come back? Should he come back? What would it mean? And you think, well, that shows that there's a void, doesn't it, at the heart of the government at the moment that somehow needs to be filled. I'd find that quite an interesting commentary, I think, on where the Conservative Party is at the moment. Anyway, so the Conservative conference is over, and the big question is this: was it a success or a failure for Rishi Sunak? I am bang up for the Labour conference, which I will be at Monday and Tuesday next week. It is going to be a real eye-opener, I think, after both these conferences, to see where we're at politically in this country. We will know a lot more, I suspect, about the result of the next general election come next Wednesday. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewberry and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
5:48, wonderful people. You are watching or listening to me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, we all heard Rishi's rallying call earlier today, didn't we, at Tory party conference in Manchester. He made a series of policy announcements and attempted to set himself apart from Sir Keir Starmer and Labour. We're seeing them both do that now, aren't we? Which is, I think, quite nice. But this is likely to be the last party conference season before the next general election. For weeks, Sunak was about 20, 25 points, possibly even worse than that at one stage, behind Labour. Catastrophe. Then, one poll, so that he was 10 points behind as the conference was about to start. So has this week been a success for the Prime Minister or not? I cannot wait, by the way, to see the polls this time next week. Labour conference ends. Where will we be at? But joining me now to discuss this and to answer the question is polling guru. It's Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. It's Sir John Curtis. Sir John, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So where are we at? Has Tory party conference been a net win or a net loss for Sunak and co?
Well, I think the first thing I have to say to you, for all the excitement that people like yourself and myself and the interest that we have in party conferences, there is actually a lovely piece that came out just a couple of days ago showing that if you take all of the party conferences from 1955 through to last year, on average, their effect is zero. So yes, occasionally the odd conference makes a difference, but usually by the end of October, the polls look very similar to what they were at the end of August. So we shouldn't set our expectations too high. And by the way, you know, so far as the Prime Minister's net zero statement is concerned, well, basically, but now the Conservatives at 27% are exactly where they were at the end of August. It's not clear that it's made that much impact. Now, that's not to say that today's speech is not without interest, because clearly this is an attempt by the Prime Minister to convey a different style. And in a sense, to try and give some indication that perhaps he's not just somebody who can simply manage the ship, but can also to give it some sense of direction. And I think it's particularly interesting challenge to Labour, given that Labour, in a sense, are deeply reluctant to say too much about how they would govern the country differently.
Well, that's interesting. John,
primarily,
can I flip it on its head slightly for you, Sir John, if that's all right? Because in the last couple of weeks, we've had Keir Starmer, whether he intended to or not, getting embroiled in issues involving things like, you know, some EU asylum quota or votes for 16-year-olds. He went and met Macron. There was a lot to do with all of that. And I actually wonder whether or not there's a case to say that the more we hear from Sir Keir, the worse his polling is going to get, as opposed to Rishi Sunak doing something proactive that leads to a late surge.
Well, the trouble is, Patrick, again, this is where people like yourself and myself have to be very careful about assuming how much of any of the news that we cover gets through to the wider public. So if you look at Opinions poll on Sunday, which asked people where they thought the Labour Party stands on Brexit and on the European Union, the figures are exactly the same for all practical purposes to what they had been long before Sir Keir Starmer's trips to Paris and to Brussels. The public, frankly, have not taken much notice, and that's the reason also why we have to be careful about conferences. But I think the interesting thing, however, is whether or not Rishi Sunak's attempt to change his style will make Sir Keir Starmer think about whether he can simply, for the most part, not say too much about how he would improve Britain, but simply rely on attacking the government. Because now we've got a government that, in a sense, is trying to distance itself from the past of both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, and trying to address at least some of the concerns the public have in perhaps in a more substantive way than Labour have so far been inclined to do so.
If either of them had a personality, do you think they'd romp home?
Well, that, of course, is one of the problems. Neither Mr. Sunak nor Sir Keir are the most charismatic of individuals. Neither of them stand that highly with the public when you ask them whether you think of them favourably or unfavourably.
Okay.
And I think, insofar as there were question marks about Mr. Sunak's speech today, I mean, one is, what is it that joins together getting rid of HS2, the eventual banning of cigarettes, and changing the educational qualifications of 16 to 19-year-olds? How do you join those particular dots into a broader synoptic message? And, one of the things that so far we've not really got from him is some coherent sense of the kind of country he wants to create. And I still think that question is still left hanging. But the truth is, it's also a question that is left hanging over Sir Keir Starmer.
Yeah, indeed. Look, Sir John, in a way, thank you, although, to summarise, what you have done is come on and say no one will have really cared about any of the topics that you spent the last 3 hours talking about, and they never will. So thank you for a dose of realism at the end there. So Sir John Curtis, the Professor of Politics and Polling Guru. I love you, John. Take care. At the University of Strathclyde. Good grief. Well, anyway, I'm excited for the Labour Party conference next week. I don't know about you. I think it will be revealing. I think you do care. But up next, we've got Michelle Dewberry with Jubes & Co, followed by, of course, Nigel Farage, the man himself. He's been the talk of this show. He's been the talk of conference. See what his latest hot takes are. I will see you tomorrow at 3. Oh, no, I'm on at 9.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a north-south split with the weather today. Wet for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, most of England and Wales dry under the influence of high pressure. Further north, weather fronts draping their way and bringing a soggy feel to much of central southern Scotland and the north of Northern Ireland. That rainy zone lingering well into the evening. Perhaps we'll see some wet weather into the far north of England. Much of northern Scotland actually turning dry and clear, and here it'll actually turn a little chilly with temperatures well down into single figures. For